The rotors tore through the wedding flowers just as the officiant asked if anyone objected. White petals spun across the garden like shattered vows. Charlotte stood frozen at the altar, her hands cold inside lace gloves, while the groom beside her tightened his grip hard enough to bruise. Then the helicopter descended onto the perfect green lawn, violent and impossible, and from the storm of wind and dust stepped the one man she had never truly buried. Ethan did not run. He did not shout. He simply walked through the wreckage of her perfect life and looked at her as if the whole world had narrowed to one question. In that moment, the wedding stopped being a ceremony. It became a reckoning. And everyone there knew they were watching a love story turn into a war.
Feels. 2 hours, just 120 minutes. In that sliver of time, Charlotte Bennett was meant to forge a life with one of Chicago's rising legal stars. But here she was in the gilded cage of the bridal suite, sending a last, feels, hopeless signal to the one man who ever truly broke her world. If you still want me, come get me. A prayer launched into an abyss with no idea who might hear it. She couldn't know the truth that for years, feels. Ethan Hayes had been a ghost in the wings of her life, a silent guardian waiting for the cracks in her perfect facade to finally show. And so, when the violent thrum of helicopter blades tears through the wedding march, feels. When a hard-edged shadow appears to claim her in front of God and everyone, Charlotte's entire story is burned to the ground. The lies both men had carefully built are laid bare. To see the collapse, you have to go back, feels. Back to the first hairline fracture. Charlotte Bennett's very being was staked on one truth: she could read people, feels. A talent passed down from a mother who could smell a lie from across a crowded room, and a father whose empire was built on a gut feeling for a man's caricature. She was raised on the quiet language of tells, the slope of a shoulder, the waver in a voice, the blink and you miss it flicker of an eye before a deception. Which is why, in the end, the cruelest blow wasn't that Nathan Calloway had lied to her, feels. It was that some deep, quiet part of her soul had known it all along, and she had made the conscious choice to look away. The first tremor, the first sign of the coming earthquake, arrived on a Tuesday, just 3 weeks before the wedding, feels. Charlotte was on her way to meet Nathan for lunch at the place it all began, a sentimental ambush he had planned. He canceled, 20 minutes out, the message a cold, impersonal text. Client emergency, the disappointment was a flicker. Feels she was used to it. Nathan was a partner at a brutal Chicago firm. Crisis was his native tongue. As she turned back toward her car, she saw him, half a block down, standing outside some anonymous coffee shop. He was not alone. He was with a woman, feels. Dark hair, beautiful. In her arms, a small child, maybe 3 years old, and Nathan's hand was on the small of her back, the same proprietary, tender gesture he used only with Charlotte. An act of quiet possession, feels. The woman was laughing at something he'd said, and the little boy was reaching up with tiny, sticky fingers to touch Nathan's face. In turn, Nathan leaned down, a father's kiss pressed to the boy's forehead. Charlotte stopped dead on the pavement, a spectator to a life that did not belong to her. A sister? A colleague's wife? A logical explanation had to exist, something to extinguish the cold fire now spreading through her chest. But Nathan didn't have a sister, feels. And the look that woman gave him, that was not the look you give your husband's colleague. Charlotte said nothing. She couldn't breathe. She just turned, a ghost on the sidewalk, and walked back to her car, feels. Her hand shook so badly it took 3 tries to get the key into the ignition. The drive home was a blur, her mind a storm of ugly possibilities, each one worse than the last. You're inventing a story from a single frame, she told herself, feels. Just ask him tonight. A simple, rational explanation will make all of this seem insane. These were the lies she fed herself all afternoon. She didn't believe a single one. That night, feels. Nathan came home bearing roses and a perfect story about the canceled lunch. He kissed her, he made dinner, asked about her day, curating the gallery. He was the perfect fiancé. Charming, devoted, a complete and utter fraud, feels. But as he moved through her kitchen, pulling wine glasses from her cupboards as if he owned them, a deep cellular chill took root in her marrow. She was watching a stranger. Nathan, she started, her voice a monument to self-control. Where were you today, feels. Really, not a flicker of emotion. I told you, sweetheart, client meeting went sideways. The Henderson file is a total nightmare. Which coffee shop? He stopped, his eyes finding hers. What? You were out of the office, feels. I was just wondering which coffee shop you went to when I called. His face was a placid mask, but his eyes went dead, a splinter of pure ice. Feels. I never said I went to a coffee shop. I was at the firm. Right, Charlotte breathed. My mistake. She let it drop. For now. But sleep was a war zone. Lying next to Nathan in the dark, the sound of his even breathing a form of torture. Feels. She tried to trace the sickness back to its source. To find the exact moment she had traded her own gut instinct for the illusion of safety. When the lie became more comforting than the truth. The answer surfaced in the crushing silence around 3 a.m. Feels. It all started the day Ethan Hayes disappeared. Ethan. 7 years later, and the name was still a phantom pain, an old bruise on her soul that refused to fade. Charlotte had become an expert at forgetting him. Feels. Building walls so high around the memory of him that most days she could pretend he never existed at all. But tonight, with the poison of Nathan's lie hanging in the air, every last one of those walls came crashing down. Feels. She was 17 when she first laid eyes on Ethan Hayes. Feels. He just appeared on their porch one September afternoon. Everything he owned in a single black garbage bag. His face braced for a blow that was sure to come. Her father had found him on one of his construction sites, a kid working for cash, living in the cracks. Feels. He was 16, impossibly thin, and so quiet he was almost invisible. His mother passed last month. Her father had explained to her and her mother in a low murmur. System's a black hole. He's been sleeping in a buddy's car. Feels. He can have the guest room while we sort it out. Charlotte's mother, a woman who believed any tragedy could be healed with a hot meal, disappeared into the kitchen. And Charlotte, who'd been annoyed at the intrusion, Feels, saw the look on Ethan's face and felt something inside her tilt on its axis. He was terrified. He was working so hard to hide it, but the fear was right there, raw and naked in his eyes. Bathrooms upstairs, she heard herself say. Feels. The words softer than she meant them to be. Second door. Clean towels are in the linen closet if you want a shower. Dinner in 20. Ethan just stared at her as if she were speaking a language he'd never heard. Then, Feels, a whisper so faint it was barely there, thank you. And that was the beginning. Ethan stayed. Feels. A week melted into 2, then a month. Her parents became his legal guardians, and just like that, Charlotte was cast in a role she never wanted, sister. But he never felt like a brother, not for a second. At first, he was a wraith in their house, silent, Feels, purposeful, always seeming to expect eviction. He did chores no one asked him to do, kept his room sterile, and used please and thank you like charms to ward off being abandoned again. After school on weekends, he was on a job site with her father, Feels, saving every penny he made. Feels. He never mentioned his mother or the life he had feared before, or anything that felt like a wound. But Charlotte could see it. The boy was made of nothing but scar tissue. Slowly, though, so slowly it was almost imperceptible, the walls started to come down. Feels. He started laughing at her stupid jokes. He'd argue with her over what movie to watch. He moved from the solitary armchair to the spot right next to her on the couch. And the way he looked at her, it began to change. Feels. He stopped seeing the daughter of the people who saved him and started seeing something else. For Charlotte, it was a slow, quiet fall, and then it was all at once. It happened on the night of her 18th birthday. Her parents threw a huge party. Feels. The whole neighborhood was there. The cake was a work of art. Ethan, as usual, stayed at the edges of it all, a silent watcher. But later, when the last guest was gone and Charlotte was alone in the kitchen, he came out of the shadows. Feels. In his hands was a small, clumsily wrapped box. I didn't know what to get you, he said, not quite meeting her eyes. But I saw this, it made me think of you. Inside was a silver bracelet. Simple, thin, with a single tiny charm hanging from it. Feels. A bird in flight. It must have cost him a fortune. Ethan, it's beautiful. You shouldn't have. You're always talking about getting out, he said, his voice low. Paris, the galleries, all of it. I know you're going to fly away from here. Feels. I wanted you to have something to remember, that someone was watching you earn your wings. Feels. Her gaze finally rises, a slow ascent to meet his. What she sees is the architecture of a man in ruins, a wary animal who had taught himself to smother every flicker of want beneath layers of hardened silence. But she could see the cracks in the facade. Feels. She watched him watch her, and it was the look of a drowning man spotting the last piece of driftwood in an endless sea. I don't want to fly away from you, she breathes, the words becoming ghosts in the space between them. And Ethan stops, utterly still. Feels. Charlotte, I'm serious. I don't give a damn what happens or where I go as long as you're with me. Then he kisses her. It is a thing of softness, of hesitation, and of such complete perfection that in that one touch, the world tilts on its axis. Feels. Their beginning was a secret. They moved like shadows, terrified of what her parents would think, petrified of shattering the fragile truce Ethan had only just made with the world. Feels. But a secret has a heartbeat, and it can't stay quiet for long in a house that small. It claws its way out. Her mother saw it within a week, and when she did, there was no fire, no hint of disappointment. She just held both of their hands in hers and said, Feels. Look after each other. You're both so precious, and if one of you breaks, I'll have 2 broken children on my hands, not one. Her father was different, quieter, his eyes missing nothing, but he never moved to stop it. He just cornered Ethan one afternoon, Feels, his voice low and dead serious, and made him swear he would always do right by her. And for 2 years he did. 2 whole years of Ethan showing up on her college campus after a long shift, covered in the day's dust, a coffee in his hand for her, Feels, stealing kisses in the hushed aisles of the library, Feels. For 2 years, Charlotte taught Ethan how to be loved, how to believe he deserved a good thing in his life. 2 years they spent drafting the plans for a future that, for the first time, felt like something they could actually hold. Then, one Friday night, Feels. Ethan doesn't show up for dinner. Charlotte calls him 6 times, texts him more than a dozen. Nothing, just dead air. By midnight, panic is a shard of ice in her gut. By sunrise, she's hammering on his apartment door, asking neighbors who just shrug, Feels, admitting they hadn't seen him in days. The apartment wasn't just empty. It was sterile, wiped clean, as if the man who lived there had only ever been a phantom. Her father pulled every string he had, calling in favors, checking work sites, Feels, filing a missing persons report, but Ethan Hayes was gone, erased from the earth like a half-remembered dream. No note, no reason. Not so much as a coward's text message. Just nothing. Feels. For months, Charlotte walked through a waking nightmare, certain something awful had happened, that he was hurt, or worse. She barely ate, she didn't sleep. Her parents watched her with terrified eyes as if she might just fade into mist. Feels. The nightmare ended 6 months later. Her father sat her down, bank statements spread on the table between them. The day before he disappeared, Ethan had cleared out his savings account, every penny. And that was the moment Charlotte had to face it. Feels. He wasn't taken, he left. He chose to walk away, and he didn't even grant her the decency of a lie to soften the blow. In that instant, something vital inside of Charlotte froze solid. She stopped crying, she stopped looking, Feels, and she stopped believing that love was anything but a beautiful myth you tell yourself right before the world laughs in your face. Feels. She finished her degree, landed a good job at a gallery, and built a life for herself that was clean, organized, and above all safe. When Nathan Calloway walked into that gallery 2 years ago, Feels, wearing his success and his confidence like a custom-tailored suit, Charlotte saw him as the perfect cure for the poison of Ethan Hayes. Nathan had no dark corners, no emotional quicksand to drown in. He was exactly what he appeared to be, Feels. He would never disappear in the middle of the night, mostly because he would never make her feel enough for his absence to leave a mark. Except, that wasn't true, was it? The morning after seeing Nathan with that woman and the child, Feels. Charlotte called in sick, and she did something she had sworn she'd never do. She started going through his things. A sick wave of self-loathing rolled through her, but the desperate need to know was so much stronger. His laptop was a fortress, Feels, but the tablet wasn't. First the emails, Feels. Dozens of them, a trail leading back 18 months. The woman's name was Jennifer. She lived in Evanston, in a house Nathan paid for. The boy's name was Michael. He was 3, and he was Nathan's son. Charlotte lurched to the bathroom, Feels, her body heaving as she was sick. Shaking, she went back to the tablet and kept digging. The messages were so crushingly normal, so domestic. Jennifer asking Nathan to grab diapers. Nathan worried he'd miss Michael's bedtime, Feels. Jennifer sending pictures from Michael's first day of preschool, Feels. They were letters between a man and his wife because that was the terrible, simple truth. A whole other life, running in perfect parallel to hers. Nathan was not just engaged to Charlotte, he was married to Jennifer, and Jennifer knew. God, Feels. The words on the screen made that clear. She called Charlotte that gallery girl. Complained of the wedding as a tiresome necessity, a performance Nathan promised was purely for his career. A partnership at the firm he'd told her, Feels, demanded a certain aesthetic. An aesthetic Jennifer, his wife, could not provide. But Charlotte could. Charlotte, the polish and the pedigree, the face for the wedding album, and the arm candy for the client dinner. Jennifer was the one waiting at home, Feels. And Charlotte was the one on the floor of her living room, the architecture of her world now just rubble at her feet, fighting for a breath that wouldn't come. A tide of rage was rising in her throat, choking her. It wasn't pain. Feels. With a clinical coldness, she realized her heart was a dead thing in her chest. She had never loved him enough for it to break. No, this was something else. This was fury. Pure white hot, for his deception, for Jennifer's silent partnership in it, Feels, and for herself. For being so starved for safety that she'd feasted on lies and called it love, cancel the wedding, hurl his suits from the balcony, expose him, ruin him, Feels. Her fingers were already tightening around the phone to begin the demolition when the sound of his key scraped in the front door lock, Feels. He walked in smiling, a paper bag from her favorite restaurant held up like a trophy. Feeling better, sweetheart? Brought you some lunch. The smile died when he saw her face. His eyes shot to the tablet in her hand. For a single unguarded beat, Feels. Raw fear flashed across his features. Then the mask descended again, a chilling, placid emptiness. I can't explain, he began, his voice a low hum. I don't want an explanation. Her voice was a stranger's, a thin shard of glass. I want you out, Feels. The wedding is off. It's over. Nathan set the food on the kitchen counter with unnerving calm. He crossed the room, sank into her sofa, and settled in as if he had always owned it. No, he said, the tone almost conversational. It isn't, Feels. Charlotte could only stare, the sheer audacity of it short-circuiting her brain. Excuse me? The wedding is in 3 weeks, Charlotte. The arrangements are made. My firm will be there. The partners, our biggest clients, every single person who matters, Feels. I'm not calling it off because you've had your feelings hurt. My feelings? Nathan, you have a wife and child. And that, he said, his voice still terrifyingly level, has nothing to do with you. Jennifer understands the situation. She's fine with it. You're the one making this difficult. I am calling off the wedding, Charlotte repeated, getting to her feet, a primal need for distance screaming through her. Feels. And if you're not out of my house in 60 seconds, I'm calling the police. Laugh escaped him. A short, sharp bark of a sound that held no humor, only contempt. To tell them what, exactly? That you discovered your fiancé has a complicated private life? Feels. I'm sure they'll find it fascinating. I will tell everyone, your firm, your partners. I will. You will do nothing, Nathan cut in, rising from the sofa. The affable mask was starting to crack, revealing the predator beneath. Feels. Do you have any idea what it is I do, Charlotte? I take people's lives apart for a living. I find every weakness, every crack in the foundation, and I press until it all crumbles. Do you really think you can go to war with me and not end up as rubble? Feels. Charlotte's throat was dust. Is that a threat? It is a statement of fact. He stalked toward her, and she backed away until the wall stopped her cold. Feels. Your father's company, the business he's spent his life building, it runs on permits and variances and inspections. Feels. 1,000 little pieces of paper that could become impossibly complex if someone in the city attorney's office started asking the right questions. I know those people. I know the people in the inspector general's office. Feels. I know all the people who matter. You wouldn't. I would. And that's just your father. Your mother at the community center she loves, the one that scrapes for funding every fiscal year? I happen to sit on the board that signs those checks. Feels. And your best friend from college with that charming little bakery. Turns out her financing is precarious. A loan that could be called due, let's say tomorrow, if the bank decided to suddenly enforce its regulations with extreme prejudice. Feels. The life seemed to drain out of her, pooling at her feet. Why? Why would you do this? Because the wedding is going forward, Nathan stated, his tone as casual as if ordering a taxi. Feels. Morrison and Hale is making me the youngest senior partner in its history, and the promotion comes with an image, a lovely, cultured wife from a good family. That's you. In 6 months, after the partnership is a done deal, we'll have a discreet divorce. Feels. I'll even provide a generous settlement for your time. You can tell whatever story you want about why we couldn't make it work. But in 3 weeks, you will walk down that aisle, you will smile for the photographers, and you will say, I do. Feels. Or every person you love will suffer for your pride. Feels. He delivered the ultimatum with the dispassionate cadence of a lawyer reading a deposition, as if the detonation of her life was just another clause in a contract. Charlotte stood frozen, pinned to the wall by the sheer, psychopathic scale of his cruelty. Nathan glanced at his watch. I need to be in court. Think it over. Is your indignation worth your father's entire legacy? I'll see you Thursday for the cake tasting. Feels. He holds out the takeout, a peace offering from a war she didn't know she was fighting, and plants a kiss on her forehead like a notary's stamp. And then he is gone. The performance of a normal man is breathtaking. Charlotte slides down the wall, heels, a puppet whose strings have been severed, her body consumed by a violent tremor. The phone in her hand is a dead weight, a useless icon. Who would she call? Her parents? The police? A lawyer? They were phantoms, all of them. Heels. Nathan's threats were not idle boasts. He had the money, the connections, the soulless ambition to burn her world to the ground just to prove he could. She'd seen him do it in court, Heels, had heard him brag about finding an opponent's deepest fear and twisting the knife. She used to call it the dark charisma. She never thought she would be the one on the stand. She was trapped, completely, irrevocably. It is then her thumb, Heels, moving on some forgotten instinct, finds a name in her contacts list. Heels. It's a digital ghost she had forgotten to exorcise, a name she had forbidden herself from even thinking. 7 years. Not a word, not a sign. The name itself was a locked room. But now, she taps it open. Ethan Hayes. Heels. Every sane part of her mind screamed that this was a mistake. Ethan was from another life, a man who had simply vanished, whose silence was an answer in itself. And on the impossible chance he even had the same number, what could he do? Heels. What could a ghost who worked construction offer against a man like this? Heels. What possible defense could he be against a monster like Nathan Calloway? But sanity had already fled. All that was left was a cornered animal, gutted by a terror so deep and a fury so bright that the edges of the world had gone blurry. Heels. And from a place buried under 7 years of hard-won indifference, a memory sparked to life. A promise, made on a rooftop in Chicago, under a sky full of city lights pretending to be stars, on a perfect summer night when promises felt eternal. Ethan, Heels, his hand covering hers, had whispered, "If you ever need me, I don't care where I am, what I'm doing. You call, I'll come." Charlotte had laughed then, had sealed the promise with a kiss and whispered it back. A beautiful, foolish thing, Heels. But that memory was the only thing of value she had left. She began to type, deleted it, typed again, her hands shaking so badly the letters swam together. The final message was only 2 lines. "If you still want me, come and get me. Heels. I'm getting married in 3 weeks. Heels." I need out. She hit send before logic could stop her. Then she sat there, in the wreckage of her life, and waited for the silence she knew would follow. Phantoms don't answer. 30 seconds later, her phone buzzed. The reply was 3 words. Brutal. Heels. Efficient. Address. Date. Time. The air turned to stone in Charlotte's lungs. She sent the information, the church, the day, the hour of the ceremony. She gave no explanation of Nathan's elegant cruelty. Heels. No details of the invisible guns pointed at her family's heads. Heels. She relayed only the coordinates of her capture and then held her breath. The response was a lightning strike. "I'm on my way. Do not marry him." Charlotte, a second message burned through the first. "I never stopped wanting you." Heels. Charlotte could only stare, the screen a white sun, until the letters bled into nothing. She let the phone fall away. She folded herself inward, knees to her chest, and at last gave herself permission to shatter. Heels. It was the first time she'd shed a tear since the day Nathan had walked away from her life. She cried for the girl who thought vows whispered on a rooftop were unbreakable, and for the woman who mistook the pathology of control for the safety of love. Heels. She cried for the chain of decisions that led her to this room, a prisoner caught between the man who now owned her and the ghost who had cleaved her heart in 7 years ago. She had no idea which of them was the more dangerous predator for her soul. Heels. Now she supposed she had 3 weeks to find out. Those subsequent 3 weeks became a film of quiet psychological dread. Charlotte inhabited the role, the perfect future bride. She spoke with caterers, she nodded at floral arrangements, heels. She stood like a statue during the final fitting of her wedding gown. And Nathan, he played his part with a terrifying precision, the adoring fiancé, his hand a constant weight on hers in public, heels. A performance of devotion that hid the threat to obliterate her world. In private, the mask fell away. He was ice. He was a hawk. One night, he simply lifted her phone from the table while she slept. She woke to him looming in the dark, heels, the screen's ghost light painting his features as his thumb moved through her life. "Who is Ethan Hayes?" he asked, his voice a disquieting calm. Charlotte's heart stopped, but she had learned from the architect of her own fear. Heels. She had mastered the art of the lie that looked you in the eye. "An old boyfriend from college. Why, you texted him 3 weeks ago." "An accident," she said, her voice a perfect level thing. "I was trying to text my friend Evelyn." Heels. Their names are right next to each other. Nathan just watched her, his gaze a long, silent corridor with no visible end. Then, saying nothing, he tossed the phone onto the sheets and walked out of the room. Heels. Charlotte didn't breathe until the sound of his car faded into the night. Then she ran for the bathroom and was violently, wretchedly sick. From Ethan there was nothing. Not a call, not a word. Heels. A part of her mind began to believe she'd hallucinated the exchange entirely. Another part was hollowed out by the fear that he'd thought better of it, that he saw her as a disaster he was no longer willing to touch. And a small, Heels, hateful part whispered he had never meant it in the first place. Her parents saw the cracks in her performance. Heels. Her mother's eyes were always on her, the questions circling like vultures. Was she sleeping? Was she eating? She truly, genuinely happy? Charlotte lied, blaming it on the standard pressures of a wedding. Her father was quieter, Heels, but she would catch him staring at Nathan with an expression she'd never seen on his face before. It was a look of pure animal mistrust. But she couldn't say a word. She couldn't risk what Nathan would unleash on them. So she smiled, and she lied, Heels. And with every passing day, she felt a piece of her own soul harden and flake away. On the morning of her wedding, Charlotte's eyes opened at 5 a.m. in the bridal suite, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Heels. Her bridesmaids were asleep in the next room. She had never known a loneliness so absolute. Heels. Her gaze fell through the window to the garden below, where in 8 hours she was to be remade as Mrs. Nathan Calloway. The chairs were already there, stark white soldiers in perfect empty rows. The floral arch stood waiting. Heels. An obscenely beautiful gallows. It was all perfect. A raw impulse tore through her, the need to rip herself out of her own skin. Her phone buzzed. For one wild, idiotic beat of her heart, she let herself hope. It wasn't him, Heels. It was her mother, a text announcing she was on her way with pastries and mimosas. Charlotte let the phone drop. She had to consciously command her own lungs. Inhale, exhale. Just 8 more hours. She could survive 8 more hours, Heels. And then this slow execution, in one way or another, would be over. Her mother arrived at 7, a vision of maternal concern, carrying a basket of food. Charlotte knew would turn to ash in her mouth, and champagne she wanted to pour down her throat. Heels. Rebecca Bennett was a small woman with a terrifying clarity of sight. She saw straight through to the bones of a thing. "You look like you've come from a battlefield, my love," she said, abandoning the basket to cup Charlotte's face in her hands. Heels. Angling it into the morning light. "When did you last actually sleep? And I don't mean just lying in the dark. I'm fine, Mom. You are an appalling liar. Always have been." Rebecca led her to a chair and started to unpack the breakfast. "Sit, eat." Heels. "You have 2 hours before the hair and makeup army arrives, and they refuse to work on a corpse." Charlotte started to pull apart a croissant, picking off minuscule flakes she had no intention of eating. Heels. Her mother just watched her, the quiet in the room growing until it was a physical weight. "Charlotte," she finally said, the sound cutting the tension like a knife. "You know you don't have to do this." Charlotte's hand, Heels, frozen in the act of destroying the pastry, went still. "What? This wedding? If marrying Nathan isn't what you want, we can make it all stop. Right now. I will handle the wreckage. The guests, this hotel, the presents." Heels. "Your father and I can take the financial hit. You are not required to walk down that aisle if it feels wrong." For one manic, glorious second, Charlotte considered letting the truth spill out of her, every last drop of it. The affair, Heels. Nathan's cold-blooded blackmail, the desperate flare she'd shot into the dark 3 weeks ago, and the crushing silence that had answered it. But then she saw her father's company turning to dust, Heels, the licenses Nathan could make disappear with one phone call. She saw her mother's community center, its funding bled dry, Heels. The truth died on her tongue. "Nothing is wrong," Charlotte herself said, forcing a smile that felt like tearing a wound open. "It's just nerves. Isn't every bride nervous?" Rebecca's face was a mask of disbelief. "Charlotte, I love him, Mom." Heels. "I want to be his wife." The lie was an acid in her throat, a self-inflicted poison, but Charlotte held her mother's gaze and did not look away. After a long moment, Rebecca let out a slow, defeated breath and squeezed her hand. "All right," she whispered, Heels. "But if you change your mind even with 5 minutes to go, you find me." Heels. "Promise me," Rebecca urged. Charlotte promised, laying another lie on the funeral pyre that was meant to be her future. An hour later, her bridesmaids descended, filling the suite with a loud Heels, brittle laughter, and a manufactured joy that pulsed behind Charlotte's eyes. They popped champagne, took 1,000 pictures, and talked in reverent tones about the perfection of it all. Charlotte just smiled and nodded, heels, a profound sense of detachment washing over her, as if watching a film of some other woman's beautifully staged nightmare. At 9, the illusionists came. For 2 hours they painted and sculpted, heels, transforming her into the bride from a storybook, glowing, overjoyed, incandescent with love. Every look in the mirror was a confrontation with a stranger. "You are a vision," one of the bridesmaids breathed, capturing the moment for the world to see, heels. "Nathan is going to have a heart attack when he sees you." Charlotte found herself wondering if Nathan had spent the morning with Jennifer, heels. If he'd kissed his son goodbye before coming here to play the part of the devoted groom. The thought was a fist of nausea in her stomach. Her foot set on the vanity among the powders and brushes was a dark, silent of glass. By 11:30, she was sealed in Parisian lace, a thing that had been obsessed for months, a thing that had been obsessed over for months, a thing that cost a fortune. Bride. She was the perfect bride, just as she was supposed to be. Heels. The air in the room was thick, unbreathable. "I need a second," she said, her voice a crack in the bright facade of her bridesmaid's cheer. "Alone. Please, just give me a minute." They traded confused looks before filing out, heels, leaving Charlotte standing alone in the center of the room, a prisoner in a gown that cost more than her first car. She moved back to the window, the pull of it inevitable, her eyes finding the garden as the first guests began to arrive, heels. And then she saw him, Nathan. He was moving through a crowd of his partners from Morrison and Hale, a perfect picture of the gratified monster in his custom-tailored tuxedo. His head turned, his eyes found her window, and across that impossible distance, heels, she felt it, the cold, sharp edge of his silent command. "Don't you dare ruin this for me." Her phone vibrated on the vanity. She almost tore the delicate cage of her dress getting to it, her heart slamming against her ribs. Heels. The message wasn't from the ghost she'd called from the grave. It was her father. "Almost ready, sweetheart. I'm right outside whenever you are." Charlotte stared at the words. In 30 minutes, heels. Her own father would walk her down that aisle and hand her over to the man who held their family's destruction in the palm of his hand. He had no idea. No one knew. She typed back the practiced lie. "Almost ready. Love you, Dad." Heels. Then she found Ethan's name in her phone. The last thing there was her message from 3 weeks ago, a promise followed by an absolute, unbroken silence. Her hands shook as she typed. "Are you coming?" She sent it into the void and waited. 30 seconds. Heels. To silence was the only reply. Heels. Something foundational inside Charlotte splintered. He wasn't coming. It was a foolish, desperate hope. She imagined him deleting her number. Heels. A flicker of amusement crossing his face at the girl who thought he would detonate his life to save her from her own ruins. He had disappeared before without a trace. What madness made her think this time would be different? Her fingers loosened, heels, ready to let the phone drop when a vibration jolted through her palm. "I'm already here," the air hitched in her lungs. She stared at the screen, reading the words 3 times before they felt real. A second message bloomed below the first, heels. "Don't marry him." "I meant what I said, Charlotte." The sound of her mother's voice bled through the oak door. "Honey, it's time." Her eyes darted from the phone's phantom glow to the manicured garden where Nathan was waiting. Heels, then to the stranger in the mirror, a perfect bride, adorned for a sacrifice. Heels. She remembered a promise whispered by Ethan on a city rooftop 7 years ago, remembering the boy who saw her as the very center of his world. Then she thought of the man he must be now, and the impossible truth that he was somewhere close, waiting. Heels. "Charlotte." A more urgent knock. "We have to go." She held the gaze of the woman in the glass for one last hard moment. Clutching the bouquet like a shield, she drew her shoulders back and opened the door. "I'm ready," she said. Heels. The words tasting like either the purest truth or the final most devastating lie. The walk from the room to the garden was a fever dream. Every footstep an echo. The colors of the world too sharp, too bright, too terribly real. Heels. Charlotte is on a slow march to her own execution, her hand locked on her father's arm, as if it's the only thing keeping her tethered to the earth. An orchestra swells with a melody she must have chosen months ago. Heels. And a gallery of polished smiles pivots in her direction. She hears the murmurs, how beautiful she is. But all she sees is Nathan at the altar, the architect of this gilded cage. He plays the part of the devoted groom flawlessly, but his eyes deliver a silent, heels, brutal message. "Do this, or I will ruin them all." Her father must feel the tremor running through her, because he leans close. "Are you sure about this, kiddo?" he whispers, ready to burn the world down for her. We can walk out of here right now, he yells. To hell with the money, with all of it. Nothing matters but you. The urge to shatter is a physical thing, but she feels Nathan's stare like a predator's from across the lawn. I'm sure, Dad, she chokes out. He knows it's a lie, but he keeps walking, he yells. They are halfway to the altar when she spots him, an apparition, tucked near the back, half hidden by a sculpted tree, a silhouette that no one else would ever notice, he yells. He is a column of black against the bright scenery, perfectly motionless. But for Charlotte, who had spent 2 years memorizing every line and angle of him, there could be no mistake. It was Ethan Hayes. His form, heels, the architecture of his face, she would know him in the dark in another life. He looked different, older, of course. 7 years leaves its mark. But something else had been fundamentally recast. The boy she knew had been a live wire of restless energy, heels, thin and sharp and trying to take up less space in the world. This man was solid, carved from something denser, radiating a stillness that was more menacing than any overt threat. His gaze was locked on her, heels, a focused beam that seemed to be stealing the oxygen from the air. Charlotte stumbles, and her father's grip tightens, the only thing keeping her standing. Are you okay? Fine. She manages to breathe, a lie so enormous it should have a sound. Heels. Her heart is a wild drum against her ribs. Her hands are shaking, and every cell in her body is screaming at her to run. But where? They reach the altar. Her father kisses her cheek, places her hand in Nathan's, and steps away. Nathan's grip is like a shackle. He smiles the smile of a saint. You look beautiful, he whispers, before her voice hardens to a sliver of ice. Don't you dare try anything. Heels. Efficient is a woman Nathan handpicked, a gentle soul whose kindness feels obscene in this setting, a hostage exchange masquerading as a wedding. She opens with the standard liturgy, the dearly beloveds, but Charlotte has already left her own body, heels. Her awareness has collapsed to a single point at the back of the garden. Ethan. He hasn't shifted an inch, but his stare is a physical pressure against her skin. From this distance, she can't read his expression, but she can feel its weight, heels. The ceremony drones on about love and forever, and Nathan delivers his vows with the smooth confidence of a practiced liar. Charlotte hears herself repeating the words, each one a mouthful of ash. And then it comes, the dramatic precipice, heels. If anyone can show just cause why they may not be lawfully joined together, the officiant announces, let them speak now, or else hereafter forever hold their peace. A thick, profound silence falls over the garden. It is the trope made real. Heels. You can hear the birds, feel the sun, smells the sick sweetness of 1,000 flowers. Nathan's fingers dig into hers, a final, unspoken command. The officiant smiles, about to move on when a new noise cuts through the quiet, the rhythmic thwump 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 of helicopter blades. Faint at first, then closer, louder. Guests begin to shift, murmuring, looking to the sky. Nathan's grip is now bone-breaking. The officiant stands frozen, heels. Without warning, a deafening roar rips the sky apart. A black helicopter clears the trees, banking so low over the estate it feels like an attack. It makes one predatory loop over the assembly as the downdraft from its rotors hits like a physical blow. Heels. Flower arrangements explode. Tablecloths are whipped into the air. It is a violent intrusion of pure chaos. Nathan's face is a mask of stunned disbelief. What in the hell? The machine begins its descent, coming to rest directly on the immaculate lawn, heels, no more than 30 feet from them. The noise is a physical battery. The wind shreds what's left of the decor. Guests are scrambling for cover. A woman screams. The helicopter's side door slides open, and Ethan Hayes steps out, heels. He doesn't look like a man crashing a wedding. He looks like he's arriving to close a deal, heels. Dressed in black, collar open, he carries an atmosphere of total calm, as if landing a chopper in the middle of a high society ceremony is the most ordinary thing in the world. He looks lethal. This is not the boy she knew. The quiet kid who flinched from confrontation is gone, replaced by a man who moves with the terrifying self-possession of someone who no longer bothers to calculate risk. 2 other men emerge from the aircraft behind him, heels. In that moment, the established order isn't broken by a word, it is obliterated by a presence. The men flanking Ethan are not just guards, they are symbols of a world where polite agreements are meaningless. They're synchronized, heels. Predatory stillness introduces a new reality into this carefully constructed stage play. Nathan's fury is the sputtering of a machine whose gears have just been jammed. This is a private party, he yells, a man clinging to rules that no longer apply, heels. But Ethan exists in a different jurisdiction. His walk down the ruined aisle is a reclamation, an erasure of the ceremony itself. He moves through the beautiful wreckage he has made, his eyes never leaving Charlotte. Feels. The last 7 years are carved into the lines of his face, a testament to the fire that remade him. But the look in his eyes, that searing intensity, is unchanged. It's a look that carves her out of the crowd, Feels, creating a universe of only two amid the chaos. Feels. His words, when they come, are not an explanation but a statement of fact. You called. I'm here. The entire architecture of the day shifts. Nathan, the man who was moments from becoming her husband, is blocked by a wall of silent, immovable muscle, his authority vanishing into thin air. Feels. Ethan's question is a scalpel, aimed right at Charlotte, slicing through the wedding's elaborate performance to get to the truth. Do you want to marry this man? It's a challenge thrown not at Nathan, Feels, but at the entire world of secured transactions he represents. Nathan's panicked response, of course she does, is the system trying to reassert its authority, to speak for its captive. But Ethan's reply is chillingly quiet. I wasn't asking you, Feels. The coldness of it strips Nathan of his voice, his power, his very presence. And just like that, Charlotte is no longer a bride. She is on trial, judged by the very people who came to celebrate her. The weight of their stares is suffocating, Feels, a silent current pulling her toward upholding the beautiful lie. The choice is impossibly stark. Nathan's gilded prison, reinforced by the threat of her family's destruction, or the terrifying unknown void that Ethan represents. Feels. The conflict is not between two men. Feels. It's between two promises, Nathan's vow of comfortable damnation and a long-dead promise made on a rooftop by a boy who just came back from the grave to honor it. Feels. Charlotte's no comes first as a whisper and then as a proclamation, a 1-2 punch that shatters the scene's delicate illusion. It is a violent act of taking herself back. Nathan's face, a canvas shifting from ghost white to furious red, Feels, charts the brutal murder of his control. His threats that follow are not about love. They're about ownership. He invokes her femme, felt some speaks of ruin, trying to pull her back into the gilded cage. Ethan's entry, the simple phrase, let's go, Feels, is not an argument but an exit. An escape route carved into the wall of the world. When Charlotte looks at Nathan now, she sees the handsome mask of the suitor peel away, revealing the twisted snarl of a king denied his property. Her parents, Feels, fixed in a tableau of shock, are the collateral damage of her rebellion, the wreckage of their own carefully drawn maps. Nathan's final choked threat to end her is the last gasp of a dying regime, but Ethan's quiet presence creates a new, Feels, more dangerous order. Feels. The silent communication that flashes between the two men is a transfer of deeds, a judgment rendered without a word. Nathan isn't just defeated. He is fundamentally unmade. Charlotte lets the bouquet fall from her fingers, a ritualistic unburdening of her sacrificial duty. And in taking Ethan's hand, she chooses the terrifying unknown wilderness he represents over the predictable prison she was seconds from accepting. Feels. Their movement down the aisle is a retreat, the wedding march played in reverse. This is not a walk toward a new future, but a flight from a suffocating living death. The bridal gown, once the very icon of purity, Feels, becomes a physical restraint to her freedom, a silken cage she has to tear herself out of. Behind them, the artifice of the garden collapses into nature at its most raw, chaotic, loud, and unforgiving. Feels. The single voice of the guests breaks apart into a disarray of individual shouts and bewildered cries. Her mother's shriek and Nathan's choked rage are the sounds of an entire order being violently dismantled. Feels. Her refusal to look back is a supreme act of will, the severing of a cord to the life she was supposed to want, to the woman she was supposed to be. The aircraft's ascent is transcendent, a literal rise above the drama below. From this new vantage, Feels, the wedding becomes a tableau of utter ruin. Nathan is nothing more than a small, powerless effigy of fury. Feels. Her parents are just broken figures in a shattered portrait. The whole landscape of her former existence, the trampled petals, the overturned chairs, is exposed as the fragile construction it was, so easily and completely annihilated. Then, as they clear the trees, it simply disappears. The past, erased by altitude, and only then does she finally turn to meet the gaze of this chaos's architect. Feels. His eyes were already on her, his face a perfect and terrifying emptiness. Not joy, not even relief. It was something else entirely, an emotion that looked so much like dread. Are you okay, he asks, and in that quiet space after the question, Feels. Charlotte begins to laugh. It is a force she cannot contain. The question itself is so profoundly absurd, so ridiculously small against the scale of the cataclysm her life has just become, That laughter is the only response left. It escapes her, a fragile heels. Trembling sound perched right on the edge of a complete breakdown. Ethan waits, letting the strange storm pass. That isn't really an answer, he says, his voice gentle when the sound finally dies. I just ran from my own wedding in a helicopter. Heels. Charlotte shoots back, her voice shaking. I have no idea if I'm okay. I don't even know what I am anymore. A fair point. For a long beat, they hang there in the deafening roar of the cabin, a world where you have to shout to be heard. Heels. Charlotte looks down at her hands. They're shaking. The truth is, every part of her is shaking. Where are we going? She finally asks. Somewhere safe. Somewhere Nathan Calloway can't find you. Ethan lets a moment pass. I have a house. Heels. A long way from the city. It's isolated, completely secure. You can have all the time you need. Charlotte can only manage a slow, hollow nod. Then one question cuts through the hurricane in her thoughts. How did you know? About Nathan. Heels. About what he was doing. Ethan's face becomes an unreadable mask of stone. Maybe we save that for later. Ethan, she presses. He holds the silence for a long, heavy second. Heels. And then he says it. I've been keeping an eye on you for a while. Charlotte just stares, the words not quite computing. What does that mean, keeping an eye? It means making sure you were safe, that you were okay, that nobody, Heels. He seems to search for the right word. That nobody could hurt you. For how long? Ethan turns his head to look out the window, his gaze lost in the city lights sprawling below, a clear refusal to look at her. Since I left, Heels. The sentence lands like a punch to the gut. Since you, Ethan, that was 7 years ago. I know, you've been watching me for 7 years? Not watching, just checking in. That's what watching is. Charlotte's voice climbs, Heels, pitched with a wild mix of anger and fear. That is the literal definition of observing someone. You vanished, Heels. No calls, no letters, not one word to let me know you were alive, and you've been secretly spying on me this whole time? I couldn't contact you, Ethan says, and the agony in his voice is real. I wanted to. Every day I wanted to call you, but I couldn't, Heels. Why not? Because he stops, dragging a hand through his hair. The gesture is so familiar, it hits her like a physical memory. It's complicated, then uncomplicated. Charlotte is shouting now, Heels, not caring about his crew trying to make themselves invisible in their seats. You crash my wedding like you're in some cheap action movie and tell me you've been stalking me for almost a decade. I was not stalking you, Heels. So you give me it's complicated? I just burned my entire world to the ground back there, Ethan. My family, my friends, my home, everything. The absolute bare minimum you owe me is a reason for why you disappeared. The helicopter banked hard, turning east. Heels. Ethan just watched her, a war of indecipherable emotions on his face, before he finally broke, sighing. When I left, he started, his voice low, gravelly. It wasn't my choice. If I had stayed, my presence would have put a bullet in you. Heels. Charlotte went perfectly still. What? After your father took me in, I thought I was out. Free from my mother's world. I thought her contacts, her debts, all that poison, I thought it died with her. I was wrong. Heels. 6 months after I moved in with your family, they found me. Who found you? The people my mother owed. The worst kind, Charlotte. The kind that view debts as blood oaths. And they don't care who they have to hurt to collect. Heels. Ethan's jaw was clenched so hard the muscle jumped. Heels. They gave me a choice. Option 1, I could become their new asset. Or option 2, they could start taking pieces from the people I cared about until I agreed. They had pictures, Charlotte, of you, your parents. They knew your class schedule, Heels, your father's office. They knew everything. A deep, unnatural cold seeped into Charlotte's bones, chilling her from the inside out. So I left, he confirmed. I thought if I just vanished, completely cut myself out of your life, Heels, they'd have no more leverage. I thought you would finally be safe. He paused, his eyes a universe of regret. I got a lot of things wrong back then, but that I got right. Heels. They stopped bothering you the second I was gone. And you've just been, working for them for 7 years? For about 6 months, he shot back. Then I found my own way out, Heels. But getting out clean meant making sure I could never be leveraged like that again. It meant making sure no one could ever use the people I love against me. He finally turned and looked right at her. I built an empire, Charlotte, Heels. Something so powerful that no one can ever touch me or anyone I care about again. And the second it was done, you were under its protection too, whether you knew it or not. Charlotte's mind was spinning. Too much information, Heels. Too many secrets crashing down at once. Protected how? Whatever you needed. A quiet infusion of cash when times got tough. I never took any money from you. Feels. That scholarship your senior year. The one that appeared out of thin air and was gone after you graduated. That gallery job that just happened to open up, because I paid them to create it for you. The apartment, in a secure building I chose. Feels. Ethan's voice was a low, steady current. So when Nathan Calloway appeared, I started digging, and when I found out what he really was, I tried to get you the proof without you ever knowing it came from me. Charlotte's entire world flipped upside down. Feels. The pictures. Which ones? 3 weeks ago. Someone mailed me photos of Nathan with another woman, and their child. Proof. Absolute proof he was living a double life. Feels. It was then I went to him, and he. Her voice died, the memory of Nathan's poison, his threats, stealing the air from her lungs. He promised he would destroy my family if I dared to end the engagement. Ethan's face became a mask of stone. Feels. The threats? I didn't know about those. If I'd realized you were the one who, yes, you've been pulling the strings of my life for 7 years. I've been keeping you breathing for 7 years. There's a world of difference. Feels. Charlotte's voice was a raw shout now in the helicopter's tight space, but she was past caring. You don't have the right to decide what becomes of me, Ethan. You are not the judge of my existence. Not who I love, or what I do, or where I live. Feels. That's not protection. It's a prison. I know. The words were a ghost of a sound from him. You're right. I know you're right. But I was incapable of it, Charlotte. I couldn't just stand there and watch you march into that disaster. Feels. Not when I could stop it, even if stopping it meant you would hate me for it. I never lied. You disappeared. You let me believe you were gone, or that you never cared, or I have no idea what I was supposed to believe. The whole time, Feels. You were somewhere in the shadows, watching me, moving the pieces of my life around like I was just some doll. Tears, hot with betrayal, started to well. I mourned you, Ethan. For months I was sick with it, thinking the absolute worst had taken you. Feels. And you were fine. You were completely fine, and you couldn't send one single message. I'm sorry. The words were hollow, meaningless. I am so sorry, Charlotte, for all of it, for leaving you, for the silence, for the monstrous way I handled this. Feels. It was a decision built on a lie, a broken belief that her safety was too fragile for the weight of the truth. The fallacy of it all sharpened into focus as the helicopter descended to a private landing pad. Feels. A metal tiara on a skyscraper Charlotte had never seen before. Below them, the city bled out into a cold galaxy of lights, completely oblivious to the fact a universe had just imploded and was now being sloppily rebuilt around one woman. Feels. She watched Ethan, the man who authored her heartbreak and her rescue in the same violent motion, and tried to chart the storm inside her. Rage was there, of course. Betrayal, a vertigo of confusion, a deep, icy dread. But under all that wreckage, Feels. Quieted by years of grief but refusing to die, was the phantom of a feeling from 7 years ago, from a first kiss in her parents' kitchen. Love. An irrational, stubborn, almost laughable love that simply would not be put out. Feels. I can't think about this right now, Charlotte said, her voice stripped of all feeling. I don't know how to start. I need to be alone, to think. Take all the time in the world. Ethan answered, his voice soft. I'm not leaving. Not this time. Feels. The machine landed with a gentleness that felt wrong for its size. One of Ethan's men pulled the door open, helping Charlotte out onto the rooftop. The wind from the rotors whipped her wedding dress around her legs. A final, bitter piece of theater. Feels. An hour ago, she was at an altar, ready to chain herself to a man she didn't love. Ethan guided her to a door that slid open into a penthouse of cold, minimalist design, a home that cost more than she'd earned in a decade. She walked inside, a ghost in white. Feels. Her mind still trying to catch up with the last 60 minutes. Feels. The bedroom is that way, Ethan said, a vague motion of his hand. Your own bathroom. I had some clothes delivered that should fit. If you need anything else, tell me. Charlotte could only give a slow, empty nod. A single, sharp thought cut through the haze. Feels. My parents. They're going to be frantic. I have to if I need to. It's been dealt with. My people made contact 10 minutes ago. They know you are safe. They are on their way here now if you want to see them. Of course they were. Feels. Of course it was handled. This was the core of Ethan, a man who always operated 10 moves ahead of any consequence. Charlotte felt the familiar burn of tears build behind her eyes, but was too drained to let them fall. Okay, she whispered. Okay, Feels. I'm going to change and get out of this dress. She started for the bedroom, then stopped, her gaze turning back to him. Feels. Ethan was standing alone in the middle of his huge, sterile living space, and for the first time she saw a look on his face that did not exist in her memory of him. He looked utterly lost, feels adrift, a jarring contradiction to the man of dangerous certainty who had just ripped her wedding out of the sky. Ethan, she said, her voice quiet. The promise you made, on the roof, that you would come if I needed you. I remember it. But did you mean it? Feels. Was that real? Or was that just something kids say to each other when they think they've found love? Ethan's gaze found hers, locking across the silent room. I meant it, he said, his voice a low, solid thing in the stillness. Feels. And he had meant it. For 7 straight years, every single day, it was the only promise he kept that mattered at all. Charlotte gave a slow, searching nod, then vanished into the bedroom, pulling the door shut behind her. Feels. She took maybe 3 steps before her legs buckled. She crumpled to the floor, the outrageously expensive gown pooling around her like spilled milk. She pulled her knees up to her chest, buried her face in the crook of her arm, and finally, Feels, let herself break. She might have been on the floor for 5 minutes or for an hour. Time had become fluid and meaningless. The dress was a cage, its fine silk and lace suddenly impossibly heavy, a weight on her chest. Feels. Her fingers worked at the tiny buttons on her back, managing to free 3 before she gave up, tearing the whole thing over her head with a sound of pure frustration. The sound of ripping fabric meant nothing. The gown landed in a heap. Feels, a ruined costume from a show that had been shut down in the first act. Feels. Inside the closet, she found the clothes he'd promised. Jeans, shirts, a sweater, all her size, of course. After 7 years of watching her life from a distance, Ethan probably knew her measurements better than she knew them herself. Feels. The idea should have felt more like a violation than it did, but Charlotte was too hollowed out to feel anything but a profound aching exhaustion. She pulled on the jeans and a t-shirt, splashed cold water on her face in the attached bathroom, Feels, and watched $700 of makeup swirl down the drain. Feels. The face in the mirror was a stranger's. She was pale, all sharp angles, her eyes were puffy and red, her intricate hairstyle already coming undone. This wasn't the bride from an hour before. This was just her, smaller, easier to break, maybe. But her, Feels. A quiet knock came at the bedroom door. Charlotte. Ethan's voice was low, tentative. Your parents have arrived. Her stomach dropped. In the storm of her own private ruin, she had somehow forgotten they were coming. Feels. What on earth was she supposed to say? How do you even begin to explain a fracture this deep? 1 minute, she called out. She drew 3 ragged breaths, gathered her hair into a messy ponytail, and pulled the door open. And there they were. Her parents, Feels, standing in Ethan's living room, looking like they belonged to another time, completely at odds with the modern furniture and the wall of glass. Her mother was still in her formal dress, her father in his suit, Feels, both looking like they had just walked away from a car crash. Feels. The second her mother laid eyes on her, she rushed forward, pulling Charlotte into a hug so tight it felt like it was holding her bones together. Are you all right? You're not hurt? What on earth happened? Charlotte, tell me. I'm okay, Mom. I'm fine. Feels. Charlotte hugged her back, feeling the tiny tremors that ran through her mother's body. I'm so sorry. Her father was there a second later, his arms wrapping around them both in that same solid way he did when she was a little girl. Feels, scared of monsters in the closet. For one perfect, impossible moment, Charlotte let herself feel safe. Feels. She let herself slide back to a simpler age, protected by the only 2 people on earth whose love could fix anything. But that world was gone. She was not a little girl. And this was a kind of brokenness that was beyond their power to heal. Feels. When the hug finally ended, Charlotte saw Ethan standing on the other side of the room, keeping a careful distance. He had that same look of uncertainty, so alien on his face, as if he was questioning his own right to be a witness to this reunion. Feels. Then her father saw him. He froze, his face hardening as the shock of recognition hit him. Ethan Hayes, he said, the name not a question but a judgment, each syllable a heavy stone. Mr. Bennett. Ethan's voice was respectful, but it held no apology. Feels. It's been a while, 7 years. Her father's body was rigid. He did not extend a hand. You left without so much as a note. You disappeared. We thought. He stopped, his jaw tight. We thought you were dead. And for that, I am sorry. Feels. Sorry. Her father said the word like it was something foul in his mouth. You walk away from my daughter. You shatter her heart into a million pieces. And then you show up again by dropping out of the sky into her wedding. Feels. And you have the nerve to stand there and tell me you're sorry. Dad, stop, please. Charlotte tried to intervene, but her mother put a hand on her arm, holding her back. Let him talk, Rebecca said, her voice surprisingly calm. Feels. She was looking at Ethan with an expression Charlotte couldn't read. It wasn't anger, but something else, something far more complicated. Let him explain. And so Ethan began to speak. He told them about his mother's debt, Eels, about the kind of men who came to collect it. He laid out the threats they had made, threats against Charlotte, and through her, against all of them, Eels. He laid out the grim logic of his decision, to vanish as an act of protection, followed by the long, brutal years spent building a fortress so impenetrable that they could never be used as a weapon against him. He left out the darkest details. Eels. Charlotte could feel the empty spaces in his story, the violence of what he must have done, but he gave her the basic, brutal architecture of his truth. Her parents listened, their silence filling the room like a heavy fog. When Ethan finished, Eels. Her father let the quiet hang in the air for a long moment. "You could have come to me," he said finally, his voice choked with years of buried pain. "When they threatened you, with the photos, you could have told me, Eels. We could have called the police. With all due respect, Mr. Bennett." Ethan's reply was quiet but sharp as a razor. The police were not an option. These men didn't fear a badge. They owned half the local precinct. His voice was soft, Eels, but it was lined with steel, Eels. "Telling you would have just painted a bigger target on all of you. Me leaving was the only move on the board that guaranteed Charlotte would be safe. And the 7 years of observation. It was her mother who spoke now, making choices for her, Eels, shaping her life without her consent. What part of that is safety?" "It became more than safety," Ethan admitted, and the confession seemed to cost him something vital. "At some point, it became about me. I had to know she was okay, Eels. I had to see her living her life, to see she was happy, even if I had to be a ghost watching from outside the window." "But she wasn't happy," Rebecca countered, each word a precise surgical cut, Eels. "She was about to marry a man who was trapping her in a world of lies. A man that you knew was a monster, Eels." "So what, exactly, did your protection get me, Ethan? Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like it got me nothing at all." Ethan flinches. Just for a second, a look of raw agony flashes across his features. "You're right, I should have done more," Eels. "When I found out about Nathan, I should have come to her. I failed. I failed in a lot of ways. But I couldn't let that wedding happen. I just couldn't stand there and watch her walk into that fire." Eels. Charlotte's father is watching Ethan with a frightening intensity, a look she knew all too well. It was the look he got right before he closed a deal, right before he cut a man loose. "What have you built, Ethan?" he asks, Eels. "In 7 years, what did you become?" "Dad, I don't think." Charlotte starts, but Ethan holds up a hand, stopping her. "It's a fair question." He looks her father straight in the eye, unflinching. "I built a security company. Started small, Eels. Private protection for people who had nowhere else to go, Eels. It grew. Now we do corporate security, asset protection, some government contract work." He pauses as if weighing the words. "I'm not a criminal. It's all legal on the books, licensed. But the work puts me in the same room as dangerous men, all the time, Eels. That's the world I operate in. And you're good at it." It wasn't a question from her father. It was a cold, hard statement of fact, an assessment he probably made the second he saw the helicopter, the armed men, Eels, and this apartment that screamed of untouchable power, Eels. The scene contracts. It shifts from the public spectacle of a ruined wedding to the claustrophobic tribunal of a helicopter cabin, the thrum of rotors a low hum beneath the weight of years. Here, in this sealed chamber suspended over the city, Eels, the past can finally be excavated. Ethan's confession that he would have torched every last cent to find her is not a boast. It's a hushed admission of a love so absolute it borders on the mythological, recasting his obsession not as madness, Eels, but as a kind of terrible cosmic destiny. The mother's quiet confirmation of the rooftop promise is the scene's fulcrum. It validates their shared history, transforming it from a child's dream into a foundational pact. Through her, Eels, we feel the true depth of the wound his absence carved into their lives, confirming that Charlotte's devotion was complete, and his vanishing an act of profound annihilation. He is not just her savior. He is the architect of her original suffering, Eels, and then the father, Eels. He speaks, and his voice is the sound of pragmatism cutting through the tragic romance. Demands an accounting. What now? He is uninterested in the poetry of the past. His focus is the prose of the future. He needs to know if Ethan is a harbor or just another storm. Another man who will pull another vanishing act the second things get hard. Eels. "I'm not going anywhere." Ethan's voice is the sound of stone, an anchor in the turbulence. "Not unless Charlotte tells me to leave. But the calm is shattered by Rebecca's fear, a blade sharp with a mother's dread. And Nathan? The name hangs in the air, heals. He won't just let this go. He made threats to all of us. What's to stop him now? The question is a hook, and it pulls Charlotte back down into the cold darkness of Nathan's malice, a detail almost lost in the day's chaos. She can see it now, heals. His vow to gut her father's company, to poison her mother's charity, to burn down the lives of everyone she ever loved. Nathan Calloway is no longer a factor, Ethan says, and the tone of his voice changes, hardens into something cold and final. Heals. Not for Charlotte, not for any of you. How can you be so certain? Charlotte challenges. For a long-held breath, Ethan's gaze locks with hers. Because for the past 3 weeks I've been building a file on him. Heals. Every corrupt deal, every politician in his pocket, every law he bent or broke on his way up. He continues, the words precise, clinical. I have proof of his affair with Jennifer, evidence of the 2 lives he was leading, deals, and financial records that trace a massive money laundering scheme straight through his company. I have enough to not only destroy his career, but to put him in a prison cell. A heavy silence fills the cabin. You've had this for 3 weeks, heals. Charlotte says, each word a weight. Before I sent the message you already knew, my investigation started months ago, from the moment I saw the predator he was. I was building the case then, a pause. The plan was to give it to you, anonymously, heals. To give you a weapon to get out clean. But then your text came, and I knew you needed more than a file. You needed an escape. A final, irreversible act. So you crashed my wedding. So I crashed your wedding. Heals. A sound catches in Charlotte's throat, something between a hysterical laugh and a desolate scream. You are completely insane. Heals. You realize you're insane, don't you? I mean clinically. Without a doubt, mad. Perhaps, Ethan allows, but you're safe. That's the only variable that ever mattered. Charlotte's father, a statue until this moment, lets out a long, ragged breath. Heals. Dragging a hand down his face as if to wipe away the last few hours. I need a drink, he declares. Ethan, is there anything stronger than water in this fortress of yours? Whiskey. Thank God. From a sleek, dark wood cabinet, heals. Ethan retrieves a bottle of amber liquid, clearly expensive, and 3 heavy tumblers. Her mother shakes her head, but Charlotte takes one, draining half the glass in a single, burning swallow. The fire hits her throat, but a slow warmth follows, heals, quieting the tremors that have taken root in her bones. Her father takes a slower, more deliberate sip, his eyes never leaving Ethan's over the rim of the glass. You love my daughter. It's a statement of fact, not a question, but Ethan answers it anyway. Heals. I do. Heals. And you'd do anything to keep her safe. Even things that would make her hate you for it. I would. That's what I thought. Her father lowers the glass. But here's the problem, Ethan. Charlotte doesn't need a guardian angel. Heals. She doesn't need a puppet master pulling strings from the shadows to fix her life. She needs a partner, an equal. Someone who will trust her with the truth, no matter how ugly it is. Can you be that man for her? Ethan's eyes find Charlotte's, truly find them. Heals, as if seeing past the ghost of the girl he knew 7 years ago. I can try. Heals. Trying isn't good enough. Charlotte's voice is sharper than she means it to be, but she doesn't try to soften the edge. I can't live this way, Ethan. I can't be with a man who decides what's best for me. Heals. I will not be with someone who makes life-altering decisions for me and cuts me out of the conversation. I already had that with Nathan. We all saw how that ended. I'm not him. I know you're not. But you still hid things from me. You manipulated me. Heals. You made choices that blew up my entire world without so much as a word. That's not protection, Ethan, and I am done with it. From you. From anyone. In the silence that follows, Ethan just stands there, a statue, before giving a slow, heals, deliberate nod. You're right, and I'm sorry for that. I don't know how to do this the right way, Charlotte. For so long, the only way I could keep you safe was to be a ghost, to manage things from a distance by myself. Heals. I don't know how to let someone else in. Heals. I don't know how to share the burden instead of just carrying it. Then you learn, Charlotte says, her flat, emotionless, because if you want to be in my life, that is the price of admission. Total honesty. No more secrets. No more choices made for me. Heals. We make them together. That's the deal. Take it or leave it. I take it, Ethan says, without a flicker of hesitation. Anything you need, whatever it takes. Charlotte wanted to believe him. God, part of her already did. Heals. But trust isn't a switch you can just flip back on. Heals. It has to be rebuilt, piece by painful piece, cemented by proof, by time, by the act of promises kept. We'll see, she says, her voice a ghost of a whisper. Her mother, who has been watching them with a hawk's intensity, finally steps in. Charlotte feels, I want you to come home with us tonight. You need space to think. Time to figure out what you really want. To talk to people who aren't. She gestures at Ethan, so tangled up in all this. Charlotte starts to nod, then freezes, feels. But Nathan, what if he comes after you? Let him, her father says, his voice a low growl. I've spent my entire career putting men like him in their place. I can handle Nathan Calloway. Ethan cuts in. You can't. That's not how he operates, feels. Not when he's cornered. After today, Nathan will be a wounded animal, and wounded animals do stupid, dangerous things. He met her father's stare. I wasn't bluffing. The intel I have will bury him, but it has to be played right. It takes time. Feels. Police reports, media leaks, legal moves. It could be days before the pieces are all in play. Until then, Nathan is a very real threat. So what do you propose? Rebecca asked. Stay here. All of you. Building a fortress in ways Nathan can't even imagine. My people will lock this place down until he's no longer a problem. Ethan lets the silence hang in the air. There's plenty of room, separate suites, total privacy, whatever you need. Feels. I don't require your trust. Only that you trust my ability to keep you safe. He speaks of his commitment as an absolute. A silent, knowing look passes between Charlotte's parents, the kind forged in the crucible of a long marriage. Feels. Her father's voice is heavy when he finally concedes. Just for tonight. We'll face tomorrow when it arrives. Ethan gives a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Acceptable. He leads them away to guest rooms on the far side of the vast penthouse. Feels. From the silence, Charlotte could hear the deep timbre of his voice as he walked them through security measures, his tone calm, reassuring them that his men were covering the ground floor. He sounded like a guardian. Feels. Nothing at all like the predator she'd seen stalk Nathan in the gardens. When he re-entered the room, she was a silhouette against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The dying sun bled across the sky in lurid strokes of pink and orange. Feels, a spectacle so beautiful it felt like a cruel joke. Feels. On a day this ugly, the world had no right to be so stunning. Are you all right? Ethan's voice was soft, directly behind her. A brittle, broken sound that might have been a laugh escaped her lips. Everyone keeps asking me that. I don't have an answer. Feels. Am I okay? My own wedding ended in an extraction like a hostage rescue. The man I nearly married is a monster. And the man I loved 7 years ago just confessed he's been watching me this whole time. My parents are fugitives in a stranger's apartment. So no, feels. Ethan, I'm not okay. I'm so far from okay I couldn't find it with a compass and a flare gun. He just stood there for a moment. Fair enough, he said. Feels. Ethan moves to stand beside her at the window, careful to leave a respectful space between them. He watches the city for a moment before speaking. For what it's worth, he says, his voice a low murmur, what you did today was remarkable, Feels. I've never seen anyone hold themselves together like that. He pauses. To make that call in front of all those people, that takes a kind of strength most don't possess. Or maybe it's pure nerve. A bit of both, I imagine. Feels. They watch the darkness below slowly ignite with a million lights. Finally, Charlotte breaks the stillness. The files you have on Nathan. What's the plan? Oh, that. He says it so casually. It's already being delivered to the right people. The Federals, Feels, specifically. It turns out Nathan's business ventures weren't confined to one state, which puts him squarely in their sights. My team is coordinating with the FBI now. They'll be at his door in the morning. Her breath catches. That fast? Yes, that fast. Feels. By this time tomorrow, everything Nathan Calloway has ever built will be a pile of smoking ash. His company, his reputation, his freedom, all of it gone. A person might feel triumphant at this news, vindicated. Charlotte felt nothing but a bone-deep feels, hollowing weariness. And Jennifer, his daughter? Jennifer knew everything. She was a willing partner, helped him hide the money, the works. She'll go down with him. Ethan's voice softens just a fraction, but the boy is innocent, Feels. I've already arranged for a trust. It'll cover his education, his living expenses, therapy, whatever he needs. He won't pay for the sins of his parents. Feels. And here, the scene dissolves into a moral ambiguity so thick you could choke on it. Charlotte, desperate for solid ground, sees this one act of mercy and reaches for a simple label. A good man, Feels. It's a way to make sense of the savior who is also the architect of all this chaos, to force him into a story she can understand, but Ethan refuses the part. His laugh is a dry, mirthless sound that scrapes the air, a flat rejection of the title. Feels. I've done things, he says, his voice low. That would make you see me very differently. He knows. He knows the simple costume of a hero will not fit over the truth of what he is. Feels. When Charlotte demands the truth, no more secrets, she isn't just asking for facts. She's asking for a reality she can stand on, no matter how fractured, instead of a myth. His confession is a careful dismantling of his own legend, Eels. He shows her how his ascent began not with a righteous crusade, but as a ghost moving through the arteries of a criminal network, Eels. He wasn't a warrior. He was a courier, a gear and a machine that would wreck people's lives. His power, she realizes, wasn't earned in some noble forge. It was bought with complicity in the same predatory world he just saved her from. Eels. Survival is a powerful narrative, a story you whisper to yourself to justify the choices made in the light. But in this room, that story begins to fray. There is always a choice, and always a price. Eels. Charlotte's calm is the thin crust over a volcano as she forces the confession from him. 6 months. That was the price of his freedom. Eels. A portion of the money went to cauterize an old wound, her mother's debt, a strategic move to ensure their past could never be used as leverage. The rest was seed money for his security empire. But legitimacy doesn't grow from poisoned soil on its own. Eels. It needs influence. It needs the power to make inconvenient histories disappear. He called in favors from the very world he was trying to flee, building his new life on the compromised bedrock of his old one. Is it legit now? She asks. Eels, a plea for something, anything, to be clean. Eels. His answer confirms it is, but not without admitting the cost. A 2-year walk through a moral wasteland, paying off corrupt politicians and cutting deals with known felons. He recites these facts without inflection, a clinical accounting of his sins. Eels. He claims he would do it all again, commit every crime twice over, if it meant building a fortress high enough to keep her safe. For Charlotte, the words don't land as a declaration of love. They land as a terrifying echo of Nathan. Eels. A glimpse into the abyss where good intentions pave the road to hell. Eels. You could have told me, she says, and the words hang in the air, sketching the faint outline of a different past. A past where 7 years ago they might have faced it all as one. Ethan's reply paints the picture of a boy pretending to be a man. Eels. At 23, he knew how to handle a threat, but he had no idea what to do with tenderness. In his world, love wasn't a shield. It was a vulnerability he couldn't afford for her to have. He saw himself as a sickness, Eels, and the only cure he could imagine was quarantine. So you ran, she says. It's a flat statement of fact, a single nail pinning a universe of betrayal to the wall. He doesn't deny it. Outside the window, the sprawling city is a masterpiece of deception. Eels. Its chaos hidden by the elegance of night and distance. I really want to hate you, she admits, her voice barely a whisper, confessing to the war inside her. And believe me, a very big part of me does. He says nothing, Eels. But then there's this other part that gets it, Eels. And I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. The silence Ethan gives her is a gift. He offers no defense, no easy comfort. He just lets the impossible quiet breathe. I need time, Charlotte finally says. Eels. A plea to find her way through the rubble of her life. To figure out who to trust in a world where nothing is as it seems. I'm completely lost. He grants her the time, no strings attached. But she adds one non-negotiable term. No more secrets. Eels. No more decisions you make for me that blow up my world. She looks him in the eye, forcing him to meet her gaze. I will, I swear. Eels. This was the man, the one whose adherence to a single vow reshaped 2 destinies for the better part of a decade. Don't make promises you can't keep, Ethan. I would rather be told a hideous truth than a beautiful lie. His answer is steady, Eels, a rock against the tide. It is not a lie. He knows trust cannot be mended. It must be born anew from the ash. He will accept its penance no matter the years it demands. The need to believe him is a sharp physical pang in her chest. Eels, a phantom limb of what they were. But wanting isn't beans. At that moment, her phone, a piece of her old life that somehow survived the day's wreckage, vibrates, a flood of alerts from a world she has been severed from. Friends, Eels, family, work, and then a single message from a number she doesn't know. She opens it. The screens light a toxic glow in the dim room. You made a grave mistake today, Charlotte. You and your flyboy are going to regret humiliating me. I promise you that. Eels. The sender could only be Nathan. When she angles the phone toward Ethan, his face hardens, the features shifting into a mask of cold, quiet lethality. A sudden, jarring glimpse of the man he'd become. Not the boy she once loved, Eels, but something infinitely more dangerous. Block his number, he orders, his voice low and final. Do not reply. I will handle it. How? The schedule for Nathan's professional annihilation has just been accelerated. Ethan is already making a call, Eels, his voice dropping to an indecipherable murmur of authority as he turns from her. Heels. She watches him, a silhouette cut against the glittering abyss of the city, a man of profound power whose sharp, clinical gestures slice the air. The message from Nathan is recontextualized. A day ago, its poison would have crippled her, Heels, sending her into a tailspin of anxiety over the destruction he could wreak on her life. Not now, not here. In Ethan's high-rise fortress, with her family safe and the architect of her suffering being methodically undone over the phone, Heels, the fear is alchemized, has become a clean rage for the man who saw her as property. Nathan Calloway's fatal flaw wasn't his cruelty, it was his hubris. He caged Charlotte Bennett, and in doing so, Heels, he made her reach for the one person who could burn the whole cage down. An hour passes. Ethan returns. It's handled, he says. The feds are taking him into custody tonight. The danger hasn't just been dealt with, Heels. It is being erased before it can even begin. This quickly, she asks. I expedited some things. Heels. I made it understood that time was a luxury we did not have. He stops, his stare locking onto hers. He is never going to hurt you, Charlotte. I will not allow it. And there it is again, that deep primal instinct to protect her, a force that is both her rescue and her cage. Charlotte draws a slow, steadying breath, preparing to establish the new rules of their world. I know you believe that, Ethan, but there is something you need to understand. Heels. I don't need you to be my armor. I have no intention of living in a perfect sphere you build around me, safe from everything ugly. Her voice is soft but lined with an unbreakable resolve. What I need is to be strong enough to face my own wars. Heels, with you fighting at my side as my equal, not as my protector. His expression is one of deep concentration, as if she's speaking a dialect he must carefully translate. I can try, he says. It won't be easy, Heels. Every instinct I have will scream at me to stand in the way, to eliminate the problem before it reaches you. But I will fight it. That is literally all I am asking. Just try. Ethan gives a slow, heavy nod, a fragile pact formed in the space between them. Heels. When he reaches for her hand, she lets him, guiding his. The heat from his callous skin is a memory made flesh, a familiar feeling that tightens her throat. We will figure this out, he says, a quiet promise. I don't know how yet, but we will. Heels. Hope is a treacherous thing, this idea that they could build a new life on the wreckage of their past. But she now knows that hope by itself builds nothing. Perhaps, she replies, her voice barely a whisper. We will see. It is the only honest thing she can give him. And for now, it has to be enough. Sleep is a stranger to her that night. She lies in the dark, the day's events a film reel playing over and over behind her eyes. Heels. The aftermath exists in shards of memory. A wedding collapsing into chaos. The rhythmic thrum of helicopter blades beating against the sky, the empty sound of Nathan's threats, and the crushing reality of Ethan's confessions. Every time she closes her eyes, Heels. Nathan's visions at the altar, and a canvas of shock and fury. Ethan, emerging from the ruin like some figure from an old myth walking toward her, and her own hand, Heels, reaching out for his. A deliberate choice to step into the hurricane instead of staying in the false shelter of the harbor. By 3 a.m, sleep is a battle already lost. She rises from the bed, Heels, her bare feet making no sound on the cold floor of the penthouse, a vast shadowed space broken only by the pinpricks of distant city lights. It is from the direction of the kitchen that a soft light tells her she is not the only one keeping watch. Heels. Ethan is on the living room sofa, his face cast in the pale, sterile glow of a laptop. Heels. He looks up as she approaches, his features carved with a deep exhaustion. You too, he asks, his voice a low rumble. Too many ghosts in my head tonight. Charlotte glides to the sink, takes a glass and fills it with water. And what's your excuse? Heels. Just monitoring the situation, he answers, making sure Nathan's deconstruction is proceeding as planned. She brings the water to the sofa and sits at the far end. And is it? In reply, Ethan simply turns the laptop so she can see. Heels. The screen is a collage of news headlines, a dozen windows all screaming the same story. Charlotte leans closer, her eyes widening as she reads the words. Heels. Chicago lawyer Nathan Calloway apprehended on federal fraud charges. Partner at Morrison & Hale linked to major money laundering scheme. High-profile attorney faces indictment for conspiracy and wire fraud. That was incredibly fast. Heels. Charlotte says, her voice containing a slight tremble she loathes. As I told you, the entire apparatus was already in place. All it required was someone to light the fuse. Ethan snaps the laptop shut, Heels, and the room is plunged back into near-total darkness. He's in federal custody. Bail has been denied. He is considered a flight risk. Jennifer is being held for questioning as a potential co-conspirator. An hour ago, Heels. Morrison and Hale released a statement confirming their full cooperation and Nathan's immediate and indefinite suspension. Charlotte waits to feel relief, a sense of justice maybe. Instead, she finds only a great hollow emptiness inside her. Heels. His son Michael, what happens to him? Jennifer's parents have taken custody. Heels. They live in Wisconsin, they're completely clean. The trust I set up for Michael is now active, and they have agreed to oversee it. Ethan pauses, his gaze fixed on the shadows. He will be looked after, Charlotte. Heels. As much as any boy can be when his entire world has been systematically taken apart. She takes a long swallow of water, trying to find her balance. 24 hours ago, she was getting ready to marry Nathan Calloway. Now his life is a smoking crater, Heels, and he sits in a federal jail cell. The speed of the fall is dizzying. How much of this was you, she asks. Tell me the truth, Heels. How long were you building this case against him? He studies her for a long moment, the silence between them heavy with what he is about to say. He lets out a slow breath. I started looking into him about 8 months ago, Heels. The day I read the newspaper clipping about his proposal to you. I had to know what kind of man he was, if he deserved you. His gaze is direct, a physical weight. And when I discovered he did not, I started to dig. Heels. The affair with Jennifer came to light in a few weeks. The financial crimes took longer. Nathan was good at hiding things, using shell companies and untraceable accounts, but not good enough. Once I found the first crack in his foundation, Heels, the whole corrupt structure began to crumble. Charlotte sets her glass on the table, noticing the faint tremor in her own hand. So for months, you knew. You knew he was a con artist. You knew about his other family, Heels. You knew he was a criminal, and you kept it all from me. I sent the pictures, anonymously. Heels. You sent anonymous pictures, she repeats, her voice low and sharp, like I was a target in some operation, not a person you claim to care about. She checks her volume, aware of her parents sleeping in the other room. You could have come to me, Ethan, Heels. You could have just told me the truth instead of playing this game of shadows and secrets. I know, he says, his voice quiet, filled with the weight of his regret. You're right, I should have. You were scared, she says, finding the heart of it. Heels. Scared of what? That I wouldn't believe you? Heels. That seeing me would just cause you more pain. That your life with Nathan was real. That you were happy. And that I had no right to burn it all down, just because I couldn't stand the thought of you with someone else. He stops, Heels, the confession suspended in the heavy air of the penthouse. I told myself I was doing it to protect you, but the real truth, I was protecting myself. From hearing you say the words, "Get out of my life," and meaning it, she can only stare, Heels. This is the man who can orchestrate the systematic destruction of another human being, and yet he was too afraid to simply knock on her door. The tragedy of it is a physical weight. For 7 years, her voice is soft, Heels. I worked so hard to believe I was over you. 7 years building these massive walls around my heart, convincing myself that what we had, it was a teenage thing, not the kind of love that lasts. And I almost did it, Heels. I almost believed that marrying Nathan was the smart thing, the safe thing, the grown-up thing to do. She holds up a hand to silence him. Let me finish. Then you show up yesterday, and every single one of those walls, they just turned into sand. Gone. Heels. And now I have no idea what to do. How am I supposed to trust you when you've been lying to me for 7 years? Even if the lies were to protect me, how do I let you back into a life I've spent all this time learning how to live without you? Heels. Ethan is quiet for a very long time. When he finally speaks, his voice is stripped raw. I don't expect you to. Not now. Heels. I know that's something I have to earn. But I need you to know, Charlotte, I never stopped loving you. Not for 1 second. Everything I did, every single choice, it was always about you. About making sure you were safe, Heels. Even if I couldn't be the one to make you happy. That's not love, Ethan, she whispers back. That's obsession. The word lands with him like a physical strike. He actually flinches. Maybe, he concedes, his voice barely there. Maybe it was. Heels. Maybe I went somewhere I shouldn't have. But I'm trying to be better. To be honest. Even if that honesty makes me look like the last man on earth you should ever trust. Charlotte pulls her knees to her chest, folding in on herself. She feels raw, hollowed out, feels an exhaustion so deep it feels physical. I don't know what I want. I don't know what this is. It's a conversation he offers. It's a start. Is it? She shoots back. Feels. Or are we just two ghosts haunting the same memory, waiting to see which one of us fades away first? Shifts on the couch, turning to face her. What do you need from me, Charlotte? right now. What can I do? She thinks about it. What does she need? Safety? She's safer than she's ever been. Nathan is neutralized. Her family is here. Ethan would probably set the world on fire for her. The truth? He just handed her the ugliest parts of it. Heals. So what is left for them in all this wreckage? She finally asks the only question that matters. I need to know why, not why you left, we've been over that, but why you came back. And don't tell me it was because of my text. You could have ignored it. Heals. You could have sent one of your men to handle it. You could have orchestrated this whole thing with Nathan from the shadows, and I never would have had to see your face. But you came, Heals. You dropped out of the sky in a helicopter and told a room full of people that I belong to you. Why? The silence that follows stretches for so long that Charlotte thinks the question might just hang there forever, unanswered. Then, Heals, his voice is barely more than a breath, because I'm selfish. Because for 7 years I told myself a story that leaving you was the right thing, the noble thing, the only way to keep you safe so you could be happy. But when you sent that text, Heals, when you asked me to come for you, the whole story fell apart, Heals. I couldn't tell that lie anymore. The truth is I left because I was a coward. I was afraid that if I ever came back, all you'd see was a ghost. A man who broke you and didn't deserve a damn thing. And yesterday, Heals, watching you stand there, I decided I would rather be a selfish man who tells the truth than a coward who stays hidden, Heals. I would rather you see me and hate me for being here than live one more day wondering what would have happened if I'd just been brave enough to try. Ethan's eyes find hers, heavy with the weight of all of it. Heals. I love you, Charlotte. That part never changed. His voice, a low rumble, lands with the force of an anchor in the quiet room. And if that's obsession, if that makes me some kind of monster, then it's the only truth I have left, Heals. A burn threatens behind her eyes, but she commands the tears to retreat. The well for now is empty. I don't know if love is enough, she counters, the words barely a whisper. She speaks of her parents, Heals, of a bond built not on storms, but on the quiet bedrock of trust. Can you do that? Can you let me into the light, or will you always live in the shadows, making my choices for me? His reply is a shard of glass, brutal and sharp. I don't know, he says, Heals. Every instinct I possess is a weapon where you're concerned. I see a threat, and I move to eliminate it before you even feel the wind change. It's a horrific confession, yet in the chaos of her heart, it feels like the only solid thing to grasp. Heals. Then this is impossible, she says, the sentence a final judgment. The man you are and the man I need, maybe the chasm is too wide, maybe, he breathes. Or maybe we build a bridge, hand by hand, stone by stone. Maybe you can teach me to silence the soldier, ask permission before I go to war. It hangs in the air between them. Not a promise, but the blueprint for an agonizing, collaborative piece of engineering. Heals. Perhaps, he offered, his voice a low current in the quiet room, I can show you that it's all right to let go of the weight, that to lean on another soul is not the same as being weak. It was a director's fantasy, a beautiful, Heals, impossible shot, a reality where two scarred people could meet in the wreckage between them and find some kind of peace. But this was no film. This was blood and bone, and trauma doesn't bow to a well-written script. I need time, Heals. Charlotte's voice cut through the air, a new shield she was forging. I need to learn who I am when I'm not a prisoner of Nathan's will, or a project under your protection. I just need to be on my own. I understand. Do you? The question was sharp, Heals. Because this could take a long time, Ethan. Months, years maybe. And I promise you nothing at the end of it. No guarantee I'll be able to let you back in. Then I will wait. His voice was stripped bare, a simple, unbreakable vow. However long it takes, Heals. The impulse rose in her throat to tell him no, to set him free, to find a woman whose history wasn't a 7-year ghost story followed by a fresh avalanche. But the words were a cruelty she was too tired to inflict. So she just breathed, okay. And then, Heals, a whisper lost to the room, okay. They were suspended in a long silence, watching the city lights bleed across the floorboards in stark, geometric shadows. Charlotte's gaze traced the outline of Ethan, a silhouette against the window, Heals, cataloging how the world had carved him anew, the silvered lines of scars she didn't recognize, the unyielding set of his shoulders, the way he held himself as if perpetually braced for a blow from an enemy no one else could see. Heals. But somewhere in that fortress of a man, she could still see the boy whose gaze had once been her gravity, the single fixed point in a world determined to tear itself apart. It was his voice that finally fractured the silence. Yesterday, he started, Heals, the words measured, walking down that aisle. Before I was there, Were you going to go through with it? Marry him? The easy lie was right there, a sweet poison on her tongue. She could say yes, that Nathan had been her choice, feels, that only Ethan's impossible return had changed the script. But she'd bled for his honesty. He deserved the same from her. I don't know, she finally admitted. I was speaking, I was moving, but I was watching it all from a great distance. Feels like a film about my own life. Nothing felt real. And when they asked for objections, I was praying. Just this silent, desperate hope for anyone, for anything, to burn it all down. Feels. And then I heard the blades, and I saw you, and it was it. It was like the universe finally gave me permission to save myself. A shattered laugh escaped her. God, that sounds ridiculous. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. I'm a grown woman. Feels. I shouldn't need a helicopter sent from the heavens to rescue me from my own life. I should have ended it. I should have walked away from Nathan and handled the fallout like an adult. You were being blackmailed by a man who could destroy your family. Feels. Ethan said, his voice a low anchor, pulling her back to the brutal truth. Feels. It was never as simple as just walking away. That's the wound, isn't it? I let him corner me. I chose every single day to ignore the warning flares he sent up because I was starving for something that looked like safety, that felt like normal. Feels. I convinced myself that this quiet arrangement was enough, that the kind of fire we had was for teenagers, not for me. The shake of her head was a constant, sorrowful motion. I broke my own heart long before Nathan ever could. Feels. We all tell ourselves stories to survive. That's a dark way to see the world, it might be, but it's the truth. To that, Charlotte had nothing. She drained her glass of water, the sound of it hitting the coaster unnaturally loud. I have to sleep, Feels. My mother is going to want a full debriefing tomorrow, and I need to be able to form sentences. Ethan shut his laptop, the soft click echoing her finality as he stood. Charlotte. Yes? Thank you for hearing me out. For not, Feels. Throwing me out and telling me to vanish for good. I'm still furious with you. The words were a line drawn in cement. Just so we're clear, I'm still hurt. I am completely lost, and I have no idea if I can ever trust you again. This isn't forgiveness. I know, Feels. But it's not a locked door either, and for now, that's enough. As Charlotte rose, only the low coffee table separated them, a continent of unspoken history. An impulse she didn't understand and couldn't fight took over. She closed the distance, Feels, her arms finding their way around him. For a split second, he went rigid, a statue afraid to breathe lest the fragile peace between them shatter into dust. Feels. Then, with an infinite slowness, his arms came around her, holding her like something sacred that might break. For the space of a single stolen heartbeat, Charlotte let herself dissolve. Feels. To just be held by the one person who knew every one of her broken places and wasn't letting go. And just as quickly, she pulled back, rebuilding the wall brick by brick. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Charlotte. She fled to the guest room, Feels, the door closing with a quiet finality, and fell onto the bed. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, sleep took her instantly. When she woke, sunlight was flooding the room, thick with the scent of coffee. Feels. Her phone's screen glared, 9:30 a.m., 6 solid, a miracle. The notifications were a landslide. Friends, co-workers, distant cousins who'd heard the wedding had detonated and were salivating for the story. Feels. Charlotte wiped them all away into digital oblivion and walked toward the kitchen. Feels. Her mother stood there, leaning on the counter, a mug cradled in her hands. The geography stress was mapped on her face as she looked up. Morning, darling. How are you? Like I was hit by a truck. Her mother's nod was slow, accepting. That sounds about right. Rebecca slid a fresh mug over the granite. Your father's still sleeping. Ethan left an hour ago. Something about meetings he couldn't break. Charlotte's fingers curled around the warm ceramic as if it were the only solid thing in the universe. Feels. Did he say when he'd be back? This afternoon. Her mother's eyes were a careful study. Do you want him to come back? Because if you need to be alone, if we should get a hotel, I don't know what I want. The words tore out of Charlotte, sharp and frayed. Feels. Everyone keeps asking me that, and I don't have an answer. I don't know if I want him in this apartment or on another planet. I don't know if I'm relieved Nathan is gone or just terrified of what happens now. I don't know anything, Feels, except that I need this coffee, probably food, and a shower that lasts for 3 hours. A ghost of a smile touched Rebecca's lips. I can provide 2 of those things. The shower is on you. She moved to the fridge, her movements efficient, automatic. Feels. In moments, the kitchen filled with the sounds of a mother's, the sizzle of eggs in a pan, the pop of the toaster, The quiet ritual of keeping her hands busy while her daughter's world fell apart. Feels. Charlotte watched her, a tidal wave of love and gratitude swelling in her chest so fiercely it hurt to breathe. Oh, Mom, thank you for not asking for a story, for not making me explain leaving Nathan or define whatever this is with Ethan. Just for this, Rebecca glanced back from the stove. I'll be here when you have the words. Until then, my job is to make sure you eat, and that you don't completely come apart at the seams. I think I might come apart anyway. Feels. And so I will be there to gather the fragments. The thought made Charlotte's eyes sting again. I have made a complete ruin of my life, haven't I? The wedding, Nathan, everything, an utter shipwreck. You escaped a dynamic that was poison. Feels. Rebecca countered, her voice taking on the hard temper of forged steel. You chose to save yourself over a promise that would have destroyed you. This isn't ruin, it's resilience. It doesn't feel that way. Feels. It feels like I'm standing at the very center of a storm. Sometimes resilience is a tempest. It's chaos and savagery and looks nothing like the neat stories people tell. Rebecca slid a plate across the counter. You will eat. And then, Feels, we will plan your next move. Charlotte obeyed, the fork feeling like an extension of some other person's will. There was no flavor, only the understanding that this was a fight her mother was determined she would win. She finished the plate, Feels, pushed it aside and locked her gaze with her mother's. Feels. They've taken Nathan into custody. Ethan told me the charges are federal. They denied bail. Rebecca gave a slow, deliberate nod. I saw the news this morning. They're saying it might be the biggest financial fraud case in Chicago this year. Feels. The story they're spinning casts Ethan as the man who brought it all down, as if he had it all locked and loaded, just waiting for the signal to light the fuse. And you're disturbed by that, by what kind of man could do such a thing. Feels. A broken laugh escaped Charlotte's lips. Am I that easy to read? You're my daughter. I know how you work. Rebecca wrapped her hands around her mug. You're asking yourself if Ethan is just another Nathan. Feels. If being controlled from the shadows is any different than being threatened to your face. Feels. It's the same thing, isn't it? Two men writing my life for me without asking. No, Rebecca's tone was absolute. It isn't in the same moral galaxy. Nathan used coercion to back you into a corner, to force you into a marriage. Feels. He held your love for us over your head like a weapon. Ethan, on the other hand, was building a case against the man who was hurting you, and gave you a way out the very second you asked for one. From a distance, they might look the same, Feels, but their intentions are as different as light and dark. But he watched me for 7 years, Mother, pulling strings I never knew existed, making moves that changed my life. Keeping you safe, Rebecca cut in, making sure certain doors stayed open for you. Feels. That isn't control, Charlotte. It's not the same thing. It is. She paused, searching for the perfect words, her voice softening. It's a kind of love from a person who doesn't have the emotional language to show it without causing damage. Feels. And that's not okay. Feels. I'm not saying it is. He has a world of his own issues to sort through, no question. But it is not the same kind of poison Nathan was serving. Charlotte looked for an argument, but she had none. Her mother's logic was a fortress. Feels. There was a vast ocean between Ethan's deeply flawed, suffocating protection and Nathan's cold, calculated evil. It didn't absolve Ethan, but it meant she couldn't simply label them both as monsters. I don't know if I can make a life with a man like that. Feels. Charlotte whispered. Someone who thinks his deception is my protection, then you absolutely cannot. Feels. So I wait, until he proves he's someone else. Rebecca's hand found Charlotte's and covered it. Listen to me. Don't throw away something real just because it's broken. What, your father have been at this for 30 years, and I can promise you this. Feels. Love is never clean. People are a beautiful mess. The goal isn't to find a perfect man. It's to find one who is willing to look at his own wreckage, who honestly wants to become better for you. And you think Ethan is that man? Feels. I think he came down from a helicopter to pull you out of a fire. I think he spent 7 years living as your shadow, and that the distance probably killed him a little every single day. I believe that, in his own broken way, he's trying to do right by you. Feels. Rebecca squeezed her hand. But what I think doesn't matter. The only thing that counts is what you feel, what your gut is telling you, and what you're willing to fight for in a partner. Charlotte closed her eyes, letting her mother's words wash over her. Feels. What did she require? What would she accept? She thought she'd had those answers when she said yes to Nathan. Turns out, she had never known herself less. I need time. she said, the words feeling ancient and overused. I need to build my own ground before I can figure out what I need from someone else. Then take it. Take all the time there is. And if Ethan loses patience, if he walks away, then he was never your person in the first place. Feels. Rebecca's voice was the one solid thing in the spinning chaos. Charlotte, you cannot build a life on the fear of being left. It has to be built on the truth that you will be okay, no matter what happens, with or without him. Charlotte's eyes fluttered open. Feels. She looked at her mother, a small smile finding its way to her lips. When did you get so wise? The wisdom was always there, you just weren't ready to hear it until now. A comfortable silence fell between them as Charlotte finished her coffee. Heels. Right on cue, her father appeared from the guest room, looking like he'd just survived a storm. What time is it? He asked, pushing a hand through his hair. Almost 10, Rebecca said. Coffee's made. Heels. Can someone please tell me why I woke up in what looks like a billionaire's spare guest condo and not my own bed? His eyes scanned the impossibly lavish room, the view that stole the breath. And where is Ethan? Meetings, Charlotte offered. Heels. We're here because it's supposedly safer than our house. While all of this is getting sorted out. Her father poured himself a coffee and leaned against the island. I saw the news. Nathan's in custody. Federal charges. Heels. The media's having a field day. It is, Charlotte confirmed. Ethan had the proof. A mountain of it. He handed the whole file over to the DA's office. Her father was quiet for a long moment, letting all the new information settle. Heels. Then his eyes found hers, his expression turning serious. So how are you, really, with all of this? I don't know, Dad. I'm relieved Nathan can't hurt anyone else. It's good to know his threats were empty, Heels. But I'm just trying to get my head around the fact that Ethan knew everything and basically kept it all in his back pocket until I was at my breaking point. Heels. That's a fair point. Her father, always the anchor to reality, took a slow sip of coffee. He saw the situation for what it was, his assessment sharp. He called this place a 5-star prison and told her she needed to get out, get some air. Heels. Give her thoughts room to move. Waiting here for the next emotional tremor was a plan for staying stuck, not for getting through it. Rebecca agreed. The logic was undeniable. They needed to go back to the house, to Charlotte's own space, her own things. Heels. The very air in this borrowed palace, she said, was clouding her judgment. But Ethan's warning, her father cut her off, his voice slicing through the anxiety. Nathan is in federal custody. In our world, that makes him a ghost. Heels. A piece taken off the chessboard. We are not fugitives who need to hide out in witness protection. A flicker of fear still ran through Charlotte. Is it safe? That question, her father insisted, was the very engine of her panic. Heels, this obsession with safety was the cage. Heels. He set his mug down on the counter with a firm click. A decision had been made. They would go get her things from the apartment, pack a real bag. Then she could stay with them, a truce with the world until she could figure out her next step. Heels. The sheer simplicity of the plan felt reckless, almost dangerously normal, but maybe a piece of normal was exactly what she needed more than anything. Okay. The word came out on its own. Just let me get dressed. 20 minutes later, Heels. The three of them were in his car, heading toward her apartment. The city was a brutal paradox. The city, the noise of horns, the flow of people on sidewalks. Life was just continuing on, Heels, completely oblivious to the fact that hers had been burned to the ground. The normalcy of it all was its own kind of special cruelty. Heels. When the car pulls up to her building, the sight of it, her own front door, her sanctuary, sends a wave of profound relief through her. Her space, her things. She pushes the key into the lock, hears the familiar, grounding click, Heels, and steps over the threshold. For the first time since it all went wrong, she takes a full deep breath. Her mother moves toward the kitchen on instinct, seeking the simple solace of putting a kettle on to boil. Her father begins a quiet, Heels, methodical search of the apartment, checking windows and locks, the dormant protector in him now fully awake. Charlotte walks into her bedroom and starts pulling clothes from the closet, her own clothes, shoving them into a bag. Heels. A tangible link to the person she was before, not the sterile, borrowed items from Ethan's empty high-rise. She's halfway through folding a sweater when her phone buzzes on the bed. Unknown number. Every cell in her body tells her to ignore it, Heels, but some dark primal need makes her answer. Heels. Hello, Charlotte Bennett. The voice on the other end is female sharp, a professional chill belonging to a stranger. Yes. Who is this? My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a reporter for the Chicago Tribune. I'm covering the arrest of Nathan Calloway. Heels. And I was hoping you'd comment on your relationship. A cold, heavy stone drops into the pit of her stomach. How did you find this number? You were listed as his fiancé all over his public profiles. I'm calling everyone in his life, business and personal, deals. I understand the wedding was yesterday, before things took a different direction. I have no comment. Charlotte's voice is flat, all the life bled out of it. I know this must be a difficult time, the reporter presses on, deals. But the public has a right to know what happened. The public has no right to my life. Her tone is no longer flat. It is pure Arctic ice. Deals. I will not speak about Nathan, or the wedding, or any of it. Do not call this number again. The line clicks, a final sharp sound in the trembling silence, but Charlotte doesn't move. This is just the beginning. The thought lands like a stone in her gut. Deals. The circling press, the prying questions, the public dissection of her life. Her private tragedy was about to become public entertainment. Her phone screams again, instantly. A new number, another stranger. She lets it ring, and then another follows, deals, and another. Charlotte. Her mother's voice from the doorway. Who is calling you like this? Reporters. They want the story, she whispers, the words catching in her throat. About Nathan, the wedding. A cold dread snakes its way around her ribs. Mom, deals. It's going to be everywhere. The whole world is going to know. They'll all have their questions, their ugly little theories. Hey, look at me. Rebecca is there, her hands on Charlotte's shoulders. A sudden, grounding weight. Deals. You don't owe them anything. Not a single word. Not to them. Not to anyone. What happened between you and Nathan belongs to you. You decide what to say and when. Let the rest of them worry about their own lives. Charlotte nods, trying to remember how to breathe. A text message buzzes against her palm. A second, 3 more and a blur. Her eyes find the screen, and the blood drains from her face. Heals. The numbers were anonymous, but the venom was the same. Is it true you left Nathan Calloway at the altar? Did you know the feds were closing in? A source says you left with another man. Is that true? Were you involved in Nathan's fraud? Heals. That last one ignites something hot and violent in Charlotte's chest, a raw urge to send the phone shattering against the wall. The nerve. Heals. The absolute gall to suggest she was a player in Nathan's deception when she was just another victim he'd left in the wreckage. Another call cuts through the digital assault. This time, the number is from the gallery. Her work. She answers. Charlotte, feels. It's Margaret. The voice of her boss is thin, stretched taut, with a pressure that has nothing to do with art. I'm going to need you to work from home for the next few days. What? Why? We've been getting calls all morning from reporters, feels, asking about you and Nathan. It's becoming a disruption. I think it's best if you take some personal time until this quiets down. Feels. The words are a physical blow. You're getting rid of me. I am putting you on paid leave. It's for the best, Charlotte. For the gallery, I understand. The 2 words feel hollow, foreign in her own mouth. For how long? Let's start with 2 weeks. Feels. We'll see where things are then. The real message was screaming from between the lines. We're cutting you loose until we know if your name is too poison to have on our walls. Fine, Charlotte says. 2 weeks. She hangs up, her gaze meeting her mother's. Feels. They just put me on leave. Because the press is calling them about Nathan. Feels. Rebecca's face hardens into something immovable. They can't do that. But they can, and they did. Charlotte feels scoured out, an empty vessel. Honestly, I don't even blame them. Who would want this mess? But you didn't do anything. Feels. You're not guilty of anything. I was about to marry a man who is now indicted on federal fraud charges. That makes me toxic. It makes me a liability. She collapses onto the bed, the half-packed suitcase now a monument to a life that no longer exists. Feels. So this is it? This is my life now? Everyone just assumes I was his accomplice because I was stupid enough to love him. Everyone wants answers I don't have because I never even knew the questions. Her phone buzzes and vibrates. A frantic, feels. Dying animal on the comforter. More calls, more texts. The vultures were descending. With a final numb motion, Charlotte holds the power button down, watching the screen go black before letting the phone drop from her fingers. Feels. I can't do this, she breathes into the sudden quiet. I just can't. Sometime during the chaos, her father had appeared, a silent sentinel in the doorway. His voice is calm, resolute. We're going back to Ethan's. We'll stay there until this blows over. Feels. You don't have to face any of this until you're ready. Some small, defiant part of her wanted to fight, to say she was strong enough, to say she didn't need to run. But the performance was beyond her. She wasn't strong. The world was pressing in, feels, and all the air was gone. Okay, she exhales, the single word a total surrender. Okay, let's go. The ride back to Ethan's tower is a silent film, Charlotte framed between her parents, a child being evacuated from the blast zone of her own life. Feels. Her phone is off, a dead weight in the dark leather of her purse, but its silence is a scream. A tomb of unheard voicemails and unread texts from a world that believes her agony is their spectacle. When they arrive, Ethan is already there. Feels. He's a silhouette against the cold glass and the distant city lights, phone welded to his ear. His head turns, and in a single fluid motion, the corporate predator vanishes. What's left is something stark, something entirely unguarded. Feels. He ends the call without a goodbye. What happened? The words are a demand, his focus absolute on Charlotte. Reporters, her father says, the word clipped. They got her number. The firm put her on indefinite leave. We thought it was safer here. Feels. A muscle leaps in Ethan's jaw. I should seen it coming. I should have changed your number, locked everything down. Stop. The word from Charlotte is a shard of glass, her exhaustion stripping away all softness. Just stop trying to manage this. Feels. This isn't a deal you can fix with a few calls, not some dirt you can dig up on someone. This is the price of being with a man like Nathan. You don't defend against it. You just endure it. Ethan looks ready to argue, but the impulse dies on his lips. Charlotte can almost see the war inside him as he strangles the instinct to command, to take over. It's a small thing, but in that moment, it's everything. Feels. Understood, he says, his voice now an octave lower, stripped of its edge. What do you need? I need to not exist for a while. I need the world to forget I was ever here, at least until this is over. I can do that. I have a place upstate, off-grid. Feels. Completely isolated. Only my security team even knows it's there. You could stay as long as you need, no press, no questions. For one searing moment, the urge to say yes is a physical pull, a fantasy of vanishing into the deep woods. Feels. Into some secret billionaire's fortress. Feels like the only air she can breathe. But reality is a cold hand on her throat. Running solves nothing, it only delays the pain. No, she says. Thank you for the offer, but no, I can't keep hiding. Feels. I have to learn how to face this. Her mother's hand finds her arm. You don't have to face it alone, sweetheart. I know, but I also can't let other people fight my battles for me. That's how I ended up here in the first place. Charlotte looks straight at Ethan. Feels. I let Nathan call all the shots because I thought he knew best. I let you shield me from things I didn't even know were threats. It's time I started making my own moves, no matter how hard they are. Ethan gives her a slow, measured nod. What's your first move? Charlotte considers it. What was the first concrete step toward clawing back her own life? I need a lawyer, she says, and not one of Nathan's people, someone who has never even heard his name. Feels. I have to know my exposure, to see if I'm tangled up in his crimes. I need to understand what this war actually looks like, instead of being haunted by ghosts. I know someone. Ethan starts, but Charlotte puts up a hand, cutting him off. Not your lawyer. Feels. My lawyer. This one is on me. She watches the conflict play out in his eyes. The instinct to protect fighting his promise to let her stand on her own. Finally, he just says, okay. Then her father speaks. I'll help you look. We can vet the firms. Feels. Make the first calls together. But who you hire, that's 100% your decision. It feels like a compromise she can breathe in. Charlotte nods. Thank you. The days that followed were a strange, suspended reality. Feels. Charlotte stayed in the penthouse, but she lived on her laptop, hunting for lawyers and devouring every article published about Nathan's downfall. The stories were pitiless. The implosion of his empire had opened the floodgates. Feels. Former clients crawled out of the woodwork with tales of ruin. Ex-employees leaked documents, and reporters exhumed every dirty deal of his career. Jennifer was arrested too, an accomplice. The front pages were dominated by photos of her in handcuffs, heels, being led from her house. A twisted knot of feeling tightened in Charlotte's gut as she stared at the image. Some primal part of her felt a dark flicker of justice, but a larger part ached for Michael, feels, a little boy who had just lost both his parents to their own greed. Feels. In the immediate fallout, Charlotte's life became a footnote in the sprawling tragedy of Nathan Calloway. She was the sideshow, Charlotte Bennett, the fiancée left at the altar a day before her mogul groom's arrest. Or some other version, feels. Sources say Bennett was kept in the dark about Calloway's shadow empire. A strange mercy, she thought, that the world decided she was ignorant instead of complicit. But the court of public opinion is a blunter instrument, feels. Her social media was a digital stocks, a place for strangers to hurl their poison. Some offered pity for a bullet dodged, but far more branded her a fool or a gold digger who chose to be blind. After one day drowning in that venom, feels. Charlotte deleted every social app from her phone, a tactical retreat. She hired Patricia Morris, an attorney whose reputation for defending white-collar criminals was second only to her infamous disregard for the media circus. Deals. After a forensic accounting of every memory Charlotte had of Nathan's business, Patricia delivered a verdict with a clinical calm that felt like the only solid ground left on earth. "You're clean," Patricia stated in their second meeting. Deals. "The prosecution might want you as a witness, but there's nothing to tie you to this. You were firewalled from the truth. Legally, you're as much a victim as any of them." Walking out of that office, Deals, Charlotte felt a crushing weight evaporate from her bones. It was the first real breath she'd taken in weeks. Deals. The relief was a physical thing. She wasn't a defendant. Her future wasn't a courtroom drama to be endured, just a life to be rebuilt from scorched earth. Nathan had lied to her, yes, but inside his lies, Deals, he had built her a strange kind of sanctuary from the law. That night, she knew the careful silence with Ethan had to be broken. The dance around the massive, unspoken thing between them was no longer possible. They were on the penthouse balcony, Deals. The city lights a sprawling, indifferent nebula below. The wine in her hand was a prop, untouched. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her voice a low hum against the night air. Deals. "About wanting a place in my life but not knowing what it looked like." Ethan was a statue, giving her the space. "I can't be in a relationship. Not with you, not with anyone." Her first task was to find the woman she was when she wasn't defined by a man. Deals. Charlotte took a sharp breath. "But I don't want you to disappear either." Deals. I need a new version of you. Less protector. More equal. A partner in strategy, not a guardian." "I can do that," Ethan said. The words were quiet but solid as stone. Charlotte finally lifted the glass to her lips. "My job is to ask for help, not to wait for a rescue. Your job is to offer it without taking over." It was a fragile blueprint for something new. "What does that look like in practice?" he asked. "I have no idea." Deals. "So we start over as friends. As the people we are right now, not the people we were 7 years ago. No sweeping promises, no impossible weight of expectation." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "And what if it's only ever friendship?" Deals. The question hung between them in the cool night. Her answer came without hesitation, her voice clear. "If that's all you want from me, then that's all it will be. The only thing I can promise you is the absolute truth about where I am and what I need." Deals. "That's more than I have any right to ask for," Ethan admitted. "After all of it, I shouldn't be asking for anything." "Maybe," she conceded, "but the offer is on the table. Take it or leave it. I'll take it." His eyes found hers, resolute. Deals. "Anything you're willing to give, I'll take, and I will work to earn more." Charlotte gave a slow nod, feeling something immense shift deep in her chest, a pressure held for years finally releasing its grip. It wasn't a solution. Deals. It wasn't a neat storybook ending. It was real. And right now, real was the only thing that had any value. 2 weeks after the wedding that never was, Charlotte stood in a space that was hers alone. Her parents had begged her to stay. Ethan had offered his home, but the need was primal, the need to plant her own flag. It was then that the gallery called, offering her old job back. Deals. It seemed the storm had passed, and she had been recategorized from a liability back into an asset. Charlotte allowed herself a brief, sharp fantasy of telling them precisely where they could shove their job, but reality had a louder voice. Deals. She needed the money. She needed the routine. So she swallowed her pride and went back. The air in the gallery was different, charged. Her colleagues moved around her on eggshells, their words either too careful or their silences too loud. Deals. Their eyes burning with questions they'd never ask. So Charlotte built a fortress, brick by brick, focusing on the work and batting away any inquiry about Nathan, the wedding, her life. The message was received. Ethan, meanwhile, Deals, began to call every few days. The calls weren't demands, they were just check-ins. Some unfolded over hours, easy and sprawling, filled with talk of books and films, of memories and what-ifs. Deals. Others were short, awkward, two people learning how to exist in each other's orbit without the crushing gravity of their past. She also started therapy. It was long overdue. Deals. Dr. Lisa Martinez was a woman in her 50s with eyes that missed nothing and a voice that offered no comfort. "You have a pattern," she said, 4 sessions in. "You choose relationships that are a kind of hiding place." Deals. "A space where you never have to be your full self because the man you're with isn't asking to see it." Nathan never wanted a partner. He wanted a beautiful painting for his wall. It felt safe. It was a way to avoid the terror of being truly seen. Feels. And Ethan? Charlotte asked, the name feeling heavy on her tongue. Ethan cast himself as your savior. That meant you never had to save yourself. Also safe. Also a way to avoid taking full responsibility for your own life. Feels. Dr. Martinez leaned forward, her expression unwavering. Feels. That question stalked her for days, a ghost in every quiet moment. The fundamental question, Charlotte, is what do you want? Not what is safe, not what others expect. What do you, yourself, truly desire? Feels. An entire life spent as a reflection in other people's eyes, and she had forgotten the shape of her own face. When the truth finally broke the surface, it was so simple it was almost absurd. To be significant, not as a man's appendage, not some wife, Feels. Not a broken thing to be mended, but as herself. She craved work that bled meaning, connections that were anchored to the earth. A life that was, from foundation to rooftop, entirely her own. 3 months after the law finally caught up with Nathan, Feels, she walked away from the gallery. The idea had been a low burn for weeks. Then on a Tuesday so ordinary it felt scripted, she entered Margaret's office. "I'm grateful for the opportunity," she said, her voice a study in calm professionalism. Feels, but this chapter is closed. Feels. Please accept my 2 weeks' notice. Margaret looked shocked, but no argument came. Charlotte saw the flicker of relief in her eyes. The ex-fiancé of a white-collar felon wasn't exactly a brand asset. She used those last 2 weeks to sharpen her resume, calling on every contact she had ever made. A degree in art history and 5 years in that world had to count for something. Feels. The call came from a place she never would have looked, a nonprofit that wielded art as a weapon against despair for at-risk kids. They needed a program director, Feels, someone who knew the gilded world of high art, but wasn't afraid to get their hands dirty in the messy reality these children inhabited. The pay was a brutal cut, less than half of what she was used to. The job itself promised chaos, Feels, a landscape of emotional tripwires. And yet, as the director spoke of the children, of their stories, some tectonic plate deep inside Charlotte shifted. "When could you start?" the director finally asked. 2 weeks, Charlotte heard herself say, Feels, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a small, stubborn ember of hope flickered to life. That night, she told Ethan. His reaction was a sudden bright flare of excitement. "Charlotte, that is phenomenal news! Congratulations, thanks." Feels. "I'm also completely terrified. I have no idea what I'm getting into." Feels. "You will be incredible," Ethan said, his voice laced with a warmth so genuine it felt like a physical touch. "Those kids have no idea how lucky they are. We'll see. I could also go down in a truly spectacular ball of fire, and if you do, you will rise from the ashes. It's what you do." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, invisible to him over the phone. "When did you get so much faith in me? I always had it." Feels. "I was just criminally bad at showing it." They talked for another hour, and somewhere in the easy current of their conversation, she heard herself laugh, a real laugh, one that came from a deep, unburdened place. After they hung up, Feels, a stark realization hit her. She was happy, truly. The feeling was an unfamiliar coat. Nathan's trial began with the spring thaw. When her name was called, Charlotte walked into the courtroom, head held high, and spoke the truth. Feels. She detailed the engagement. The threats veiled as concern. The precise shattering moment she understood his whole world was a house of cards. Across the sterile room, Nathan sat at the defense table, a hollowed-out man murmuring to his lawyer. Feels. When it was over, Charlotte left the courtroom and didn't look back. The fate of Nathan Calloway was a weight she no longer had to carry. Her role in the tragedy was finished. The rest belonged to the cold mechanics of the law. The jury found him guilty. Feels. Every count. Feels. Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. The sentence was 12 years in a federal prison. Charlotte read the headline in the paper and felt a single, clean emotion. Closure. The book was closed, the spine broken. 6 months into the new job, Charlotte was in the studio, watching a 15-year-old girl, Maya. The girl was lost in the creation of a self-portrait. Feels. Maya had spent a lifetime navigating the brutal currents of the foster care system. She had every right to be at war with the world, but when she held a paintbrush, the war inside her seemed to call a truce, leaving only a stunning, quiet focus. Feels. "That's beautiful," Charlotte said, her voice soft, not wanting to break the spell. Maya glanced up, her eyes immediately guarded against the praise, a reflex all the kids had. "It's not done. I know, but it's beautiful already." Feels. Maya turned back to the canvas, but not before Charlotte saw the faint, fleeting hint of a smile. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Ethan. Dinner this week? Something I need to talk about. This was their new rhythm, a meal every week or so. Feels. They were rebuilding their friendship from the rubble, slowly, carefully. The work was delicate, sometimes awkward, but it was real. Charlotte was discovering a version of Ethan she never knew existed. His hatred of mushrooms. Feels. His love for old science fiction. Feels. The fact that he'd taught himself to play the piano while they were apart, all because she once mentioned how much she loved the sound. She texted back, "Thursday work? That new Italian spot?" The reply was instant. "Perfect. 7 p.m. See you then." Feels. Pocketing her phone, Charlotte's gaze falls again on Maya, who is painting a fire into the eyes of her portrait, a look so fiercely alive it's almost unnerving. "How did you learn to do that?" Charlotte asks. Maya gives a noncommittal shrug. Feels. A gesture of practiced dismissal. "I just do." The air grows taut when Charlotte presses on. "Have you ever thought about art school?" The girl's answer is a wall slammed down. Can't afford it. Charlotte sees a crack in the wall, a way through. Feels. There are ways. Scholarships, grants. For someone with your kind of talent, I could help you look into them. At that, Maya's brush stops moving, suspended in the air. She turns and her face is a fragile territory between raw hope and absolute terror. Feels. "You really think I'm good enough?" Charlotte holds her gaze. "I think it would be a crime against God not to try with a gift like that, but it has to be your choice." A seed lands on fertile, frightened ground. Later, Thursday evening. Feels. As Charlotte gets ready for dinner, the ritual itself feels different, heavier than a casual meal between friends. The dress is chosen with intent. Her hair is arranged with care, and then the final, defining act. She reaches into a long-neglected box and pulls out the silver bracelet, the one Ethan gave her for her 18th birthday, a relic from a past she thought was buried for good. Feels. For years, it sat in her jewelry box like a dormant bomb, too painful to look at, too vital to throw away. But tonight it feels different, less like a scar and more like a bridge, a testament to a promise that survived the fire. Feels. A second chance pulled back from the edge. When she walks into the restaurant, he's already there, humming with a nervous energy she's never seen on him. He stands as she reaches the table, a courtly, old-world gesture that lands with surprising weight. Feels. "You look incredible," he says, his voice tight. "Thank you. You look like you're about to be executed." "What's going on?" They order, the small talk a flimsy bandage over the charged air between them. Feels. A palpable pressure builds under the surface of the conversation. It finally breaks just as their food arrives. He takes a breath, a heavy, final sound. "I'm dissolving the security firm." The words hang there. Charlotte's fork stops its ascent. Feels. "What? Why?" "It was built on a lie," he says, his voice low, raw with the weight of the confession. "It was about building walls, about making sure no one could ever hurt me, or the people I cared about, ever again. That's not who I am anymore." Feels. His eyes lock with hers, and they are clear. "I don't want to live in a fortress anymore, just waiting for the next attack. I want to build something, something that helps people." "What are you thinking?" she asks. "There's a foundation I've been advising." Feels. They teach security and self-defense to survivors of domestic violence, women with no money, no protection, nothing. "I want to go all in, full-time." Feels. "I want to use what I know to protect people who have no one." In that single moment, the last of the armor around Charlotte's heart melts away. "Ethan, that is remarkable. It means giving up almost everything," he adds, making sure she understands. Feels. "The money, the penthouse, it all gets liquidated. But I have enough. I can finally do something that matters, something that doesn't just have a price." He pauses, and the next words cost him. "I had to tell you because you did this." Feels. "Watching you walk away from your life to help those kids. Choosing meaning over money. You showed me just how twisted my own world had become." Charlotte's hand moves on its own, covering his on the table. "I am so proud of you," she breathes. Feels. The rest of the meal is a blueprint of demolition and creation, the story of tearing down one life to build another. And somewhere in that shared space of total vulnerability, Charlotte feels the fortress she'd built around her own heart crumble to dust. Feels. She hadn't even heard it fall. She is falling in love with him again. Or maybe she never stopped. Maybe she was just waiting for this man to finally come home. "Ethan," she says, cutting him off mid-sentence. He stops, a question in his eyes. "Is everything okay?" "Nothing is wrong," she says. "I've just been thinking about us." He waits, his face a perfect, unreadable canvas. Feels. Ethan's frame is a fortress, every line of his body set to deflect a blow that has yet to land. When I spoke of needing time, she says, the words chosen, of needing to find our way back as friends. That was the truth. It was the only way. But, feels. She takes the breath, commits. But I think I am ready for more now, if you are. If that is a thing you still desire. The shift in his features is seismic. It is the sun-rending storm clouds, a sudden blinding blast of hope that washes away the shadows. Feels. Charlotte, I've wanted nothing else from the second I laid eyes on you again. I was only ever waiting for you. I'm ready, she affirms, a whisper of steel, or ready enough to begin. This will not be simple. Feels. There will be days I'm consumed by fear, and I will push you from me. And there will be days you try to build a wall around me, when I must face the battle alone. But I have to believe we can find a path through it, if we both agree to do the work. Feels. I'm willing, Ethan answers, the declaration absolute, without a trace of doubt. I will try for as long as you will let me. A true smile finally claims Charlotte's lips, and with it, 7 years of coiled tension finally unspools from her soul. Feels. Then let's try. They exit the restaurant into the cool night, an almost visible current arcing in the spaces between them. By her car, he pulls her into an embrace. It is warm, solid, the very anchor she has been without. Thank you, Feels. He whispers into her hair, his voice thick with unshed tears. For giving us this, for not leaving me for dead when I gave you every reason. And thank you, she breathes back, for coming home. Feels. For keeping your promise. They stand locked together for a long beat. Two figures clinging to one another in the concrete quiet of the garage. Finally, Ethan eases back just enough to find her face in the gloom. Can I kiss you? Feels. The question is stripped bare, raw with all his vulnerability. Her answer is to rise to her toes and close the distance. This kiss is nothing like their first. That one was a thing of adolescent longing, of feverish innocence. Feels. This is a covenant between two souls who have been to war. Two people who were broken apart and had to reassemble the pieces of themselves, alone, and who feel the crushing weight of what this moment means. When they separate, they are both smiling. So, Feels. Ethan asks, his voice softer, the edges filed down. What comes next? Charlotte looks out into the darkness. Now, we watch. We let it become what it will be. One day, following the next. No battle plans. No forcing the outcome. We just exist in it. Feels. I can do that, he says. Feels. Good, she replies, because I am done with men who think they are required to have every answer. Ethan's laugh is a quiet rumble. A fair criticism. How about a truce? I will try to have fewer answers if you will try to ask for help when you need it. Feels. Done. The year that follows is a slow, deliberate reconstruction, a story told in unexpected moments. She and Ethan build their new existence with the care of artisans who know how easily their medium can be shattered. There are, of course, Feels, moments of friction. Times his old instinct to protect flares up, and he tries to solve a problem that is hers alone. Times her ferocious independence makes her retreat behind her walls, but each time they speak. They learn the shape of each other's scars, Feels, the precise terrain of their pain. Feels. Charlotte's program at the center doesn't just grow, it ignites. She secures full art college scholarships for 3 of her kids. She becomes a warrior for grant money, builds a curriculum from nothing, Feels, and watches a small army of forgotten children start to carve out their own futures. The work is exhausting, a landscape of constant heartbreak and small victories, but it possesses a truth her old life never could have touched. Feels. 6 months after he signed away his corporate kingdom, Ethan's foundation is a living thing. He brings in men he served with, redirecting their unique skills toward rescue, teaching women how to read a threat, how to defend themselves, how to vanish. Feels. He builds bridges to shelters and legal aid clinics, finding the handful of cops who haven't yet been corrupted. In their first year alone, they pull more than 200 women and their children out of the fire. Feels. In time, Charlotte's father starts to see the tectonic shift in Ethan, watching the quiet reverence with which he treats his daughter. Her mother, who always saw the good man buried inside, just needed to see him fight his way back to the surface. Feels. By the first anniversary of their new beginning, the family has folded him back in. The war is over, and then he asks her to marry him. On the exact date he had detonated their wedding all those years ago. A final, Feels, defiant act of reclaiming sacred ground from the ghosts of trauma. Feels. There was no spectacle, no last desperate play. Just the two of them on that same rooftop where they'd made children's promises, standing under a sky of stars made pale by the city's electric breath. I know that weddings are a minefield for you, Feels. Ethan said, holding out a simple, unadorned band of silver, The absolute opposite of the diamond cage Nathan had once tried to lock her in. So, the courthouse, 10 years from now, whatever you need the timeline to be, I'm there. Heels. Charlotte's eyes moved from the ring to his. I want a small wedding, she said, the words clear and certain. Just family, the people who are our actual friends. Something that's ours this time, not a stage play. Whatever you want, it's done. Heels, he promised, his voice low and steady, and that was all. She would marry him. 4 months later, they stood in her parents' backyard, on the same stretch of lawn where he had first appeared as a boy with his entire life in a black trash bag. Heels. Charlotte wore a simple dress from a vintage shop. Ethan, a suit he already had. 30 people watched because in the landscape of their lives, only 30 people really counted. When the officiant asked if anyone had an objection, Heels, the only sound was Charlotte's mother weeping softly into a handkerchief, a sound of pure joy. And when they kissed, a piece of her own soul she hadn't known was still adrift finally slid home. Heels. This was never about being completed by another person. She had already proven she could be her own salvation. This was about alliance. Heels. It was about choosing to stand in the wreckage of your life with the one person who saw every crack and fault line and chose to stand there with you anyway. Heels. The reception was a simple barbecue, and at some point Charlotte's father drew Ethan away from the quiet celebration. You see that you take care of my girl, he said. The words weren't a threat, not anymore, but they were heavier than a simple request. Heels. I will, Ethan promised, and the meaning hung between them. He would be her ally, not her guard, her partner, not her owner. Her father held his gaze, a long, searching moment, before all the tension left his face. He nodded once. Heels. Then pulled Ethan into a firm, unadorned hug. Good to have you in the family, son. 2 years pass in the cut of a scene. Charlotte is in the office of her nonprofit when Maya appears in the doorway. Heels. Her hands still carrying the ghosts of paint from the studio. At 17, she stands with a confidence the terrified 15-year-old Charlotte met could never have dreamed of. I got in, Maya says, her voice thick with unshed tears. Full ride. Heels. I go in the fall. Heels. Charlotte is out of her chair in an instant, wrapping the girl in a hug as they both cry, their tears a testament to a victory that was anything but easy. I knew you would. There was never a doubt in my mind. Heels. I wouldn't have even applied if you hadn't made me, Maya whispers against her shoulder. I never thought I was good enough. You were always good enough, Charlotte says softly. You just needed someone else to see it for a while. Long after Maya is gone, Heels. Floating out the door on a cloud of disbelief and joy, Charlotte settles back into her chair. Her gaze falls across the collection of frames on her desk. A photograph from her wedding day. A group shot of the first kids to graduate from her program. Heels, a picture of her parents smiling. Heels. And then a photo, unguarded, from a benefit for Ethan's foundation, the two of them caught in a fit of laughter, sharing a world no one else could enter. Just then her phone hummed against the desk. A message from Ethan. Cooking. My place. Heels. A slow curve formed on her lips as she answered. Perfect. I have the wine. She began to pack her bag, her mind spiraling back 2 years, to a different woman. A woman adrift in a palatial bridal suite. Heels. A ghost preparing to marry the man who was systematically taking her apart, piece by invisible piece. She could still feel the desperation of that last-ditch message, flung across a 7-year silence to a man she never truly expected to see again. Heels. A Hail Mary into the void. If you had shown that version of her this life, this fulfillment, this marriage to Ethan, this work that mattered, she would have called you a liar, a cruel one. The journey from that hotel room to this office wasn't a fairy tale. Heels. It was a brutal, scarring climb, but it was real. Heels. It was hers. And that made it worth more than any story ever written. Charlotte turned the key in the office lock, her thoughts already home, on dinner, on wine, and on a conversation with Ethan she was finally ready to have. About a future. Just the possibility of it. Of a family. Someday. Not now. Of course not now. But one day, when the time was right, because that was the one great truth she had finally learned. Heels. There are no perfect moments. The stars do not align to make the world safe for you. Life is a glorious, chaotic tangle, where things like helicopters try to crash your wedding. Heels. The only way through is to find someone else willing to stand in the wreckage with you, to commit to the daily, grinding work of building something that will last. As twilight bled across the sky, Charlotte drove. Heels. She passed the gallery that had once been her whole identity, past the apartment where Nathan revealed the monster he was, past the garden where her life first shattered, then began to grow again. Heels. She drove past the specters of the woman she had been, past all the broken pieces that had, against every odd, reforged themselves into something stronger. When she walked into the small house they'd bought 6 months ago, Eels, she found Ethan in the kitchen, butchering the lyrics to a song only he could hear, lost in his headphones as he made pasta. Eels. He saw her and his face split into a grin that still had the power to undo her completely. "Hey," he said, pulling the headphones to his neck. "How'd it go?" Charlotte placed the wine on the counter and walked straight into his arms, Eels, pressing her face to the warmth of his chest. "Maya got into art school," she said, her voice a mumble against his shirt. "Full scholarship. That's incredible." He held her tight, a hand moving softly through her hair. "You did that. You changed her life." Eels. "She changed her own life," Charlotte murmured. "I just handed her some tools. Same thing." They stayed that way for a long moment, swaying in the quiet kitchen, perfectly in sync, Eels, wrapped in the kind of profound silence that only exists between two souls who have seen each other's darkness. Eels. Charlotte finally pulled back, just enough to find his eyes. "There's something I want to talk to you about," she started. "Okay. Should I be scared? No. But maybe you should open the wine." He poured 2 glasses. Eels. They fell into their usual places on the sofa. Charlotte curled into the corner. Ethan turned toward her. The house was modest. Nothing like his old penthouse of glass and steel, but it was theirs. They had chosen it. They had painted its walls. Eels. They had filled it slowly with things that meant something. "So," Ethan said gently, "what is it?" Charlotte took a sip of wine, then a deep breath. "I've been thinking about kids. Not now, but someday. And I guess I just needed to know, Eels, what you thought about that." For a long second, Ethan went perfectly still, the weight of her words settling in the space between them. "The truth," he said, his voice quiet. "The idea is terrifying. Because I don't have a template for being a father, Eels. I never had one, Eels. There's no instruction manual in my head for how to do it right." "I don't know how to be a mother either," Charlotte answered, her voice soft. "Nobody does. But you were raised by good people. You've seen how a family can be, and you have me and my parents. You're surrounded by better models now." She reached out, her hand closing over his. "I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. I need to know if that's a future you could ever imagine. With me, Eels." Ethan's gaze fell to where their hands were clasped, his thumb brushing circles onto her skin. "What if I shatter this? What if I'm the kind of father who suffocates everything in the name of safety, just because he's haunted by what the world can do, Eels? Then I will tell you that you're being a fool, and you will fix it," she answered, her voice solid as stone. "You've fixed every other broken thing inside you." Charlotte's fingers tightened around his. "You aren't the man you were 2 years ago, Ethan, Eels. You walked through fire. You rebuilt yourself. You learned to open the door to people instead of just guarding them from a distance. How is this any different?" "Because the cost is everything," he breathed, Eels. "Because a child shouldn't have a father who's still wrestling with his own ghosts. Every parent who's ever lived is wrestling with their ghosts. It is the condition of being human." Charlotte drew nearer. "I'm not asking for a perfect man, Eels. I am just asking if you can picture it, Eels. The 3 of us. A family. Is that a world you'd want to build?" The silence that followed was thick with the weight of unspoken history. Finally, with a slow, deliberate motion, Ethan nodded. "Yes." The word escaped him on a ragged breath. "Yes, I can see it, Eels. It terrifies me, but I want it with you. My God, yes, I want that." Tears, the cleansing kind, gathered in Charlotte's eyes. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, someday. When the time is right for us both." "Someday," he repeated, and they remained there, Eels, watching the sky outside bleed into blackness, tracing the maps of all their fears, their hopes, and the 1,000 different lives they could create from the ashes. Eels. And for the first time in a lifetime, it seemed, Charlotte felt no dread for what was to come. She understood, finally, that she possessed the strength to meet it, Eels. And she knew that to meet it alongside someone who saw the whole of her was a power that could reshape destinies. Their talk had spiraled on for so long that the forgotten pasta began to char, Eels, its sacrifice announced by the sudden scream of the smoke alarm. They faced the small disaster not with frustration but with laughter, Eels, calling for a pizza and marveling at how impossible it was to navigate a conversation of the soul while also tending to the stove. It was imperfect. A mess. It was exactly the kind of life Charlotte was learning to call beautiful. Later that evening, Eels, tucked into bed with Ethan's arm a solid weight around her, she listened to the low thrum of the city and thought about the impossible journey that had led her to this room. Feels. She tallied the promises that had been shattered and the ones that were, against all odds, kept. The wedding that was a lie and the one that would be the truth. The 7-year desert of his absence and the 2 years spent building something real. Feels. She thought of Nathan, a name now tied to a federal prison. She thought of Michael, a boy of 6, being raised by grandparents who loved him, his future guaranteed by a fund that paid back the one his parents almost squandered. Feels. She thought of Maya and the others, children whose lives she had rerouted, their worlds realigned by art and the simple, fierce act of being believed in. And she thought of Ethan, Feels, of his own brutal pilgrimage from a frightened 16-year-old boy to the man who lay beside her. How he'd been forced to take himself apart, piece by piece, to learn how to love someone in a way that mends instead of breaks. Feels. Her final thoughts turned to herself, to the girl so starved for the illusion of safety that she nearly chained herself to a monster, and then to the woman she'd forged from the wreckage. Feels. A woman who now knew that real security isn't built from high walls or stock portfolios. It grows from the inside out, from knowing your own soul, from the embrace of people who value your heart, not your holdings. Feels. From building a life that is not a performance. Are you still awake? Ethan's voice was a low hum in the dark. Yes, just thinking. About how grateful I am, she whispered. For all of it, even the parts that were broken, especially those. Feels. They showed me what I was really looking for. Ethan pulled closer into his side. I'm grateful too, he said, that you gave me another chance, for waiting while I figured out how to become a whole man again. We figured it out together. Feels. Charlotte corrected softly. That's the whole point. Feels. They fell asleep like that, tangled in the sheets of a bed they had chosen, in a house they were making a home, crafting a future that was flawed and true and theirs alone. And if her dreams are ever haunted by the chop of helicopter blades, by white silk, Feels, by vows exchanged on the edge of a skyscraper, they are quiet now, just memories. The poison has been drawn. They are nothing more than chapters in a story. The story of how she learned to be the author of her own life, and how in saving herself, Feels, she found her way back to the only person who was ever worth coming home to.